The curvy housekeeper found the most feared mafia boss in the city, bleeding behind a forbidden elevator, and the first thing he did was point a gun at her. May Rivera had been warned never to go near the glass elevator at the Vesper Club. Not for cleaning, not for lost trays, not for spilled champagne. Not even if a guest threw a diamond bracelet through the doors and begged her to retrieve it. The elevator belonged to Nico Calderone, and in that club, his name was not spoken loudly unless someone wanted the whole room to remember how fragile a life could be. Before that night, May had never thought of herself as brave. Practical, yes. Tired, definitely. Hungry more often than she liked to admit. But brave sounded like something people called women after danger had already passed, when the bruises were hidden and the story had been made pretty enough to repeat. May was not pretty in the way rich men at the Vesper Club liked women to be pretty. She was soft where they expected sharpness, wide where they expected smallness, and too used to strangers letting their eyes move over her body like it was a mistake she had failed to correct. She had learned early that people looked at her and decided things. Lazy, simple, desperate, easy to ignore. May let them think what they wanted. Being underestimated had its uses, especially in places where powerful men left secrets scattered like cigarette ash. She took the housekeeping job because her mother's medical bills sat on their kitchen table in uneven stacks, each envelope a little whiter and colder than the last. Her mother had worked hotel laundry for most of May's childhood, folding sheets for people who would never know her name, until her hands swelled and her breathing turned thin, and every doctor started using gentle voices that made May want to scream. The Vesper Club paid more for 1 week of cleaning silk sheets and marble bathrooms than most places paid for a month of honest work. May did not care that the club was private. She did not care that politicians arrived through the front doors while criminals entered through the underground garage. She did not care that actresses with painted smiles cried in the powder rooms, and men with wedding rings paid cash for rooms with no cameras. She cared that the paycheck cleared every Friday, and that her mother's pharmacy stopped calling when May paid in full. The Vesper Club sat above the city like a secret wearing perfume. From the street, it looked like a narrow black tower between two old banks, but inside, it opened into velvet lounges, mirrored bars, private dining rooms, and suites with beds big enough for people who had never slept peacefully in their lives. The air always smelled expensive: amber liquor, lemon polish, cigar smoke, roses dying slowly in crystal vases. May learned the rhythm of the place quickly. The morning guests wanted silence. The afternoon guests wanted privacy. The night guests wanted everyone to pretend the morning would never come. On her first day, Mrs. Bell, the housekeeping manager, gave May her uniform, a black dress with a white collar that fit tightly across her hips, no matter how she adjusted it, and a keycard attached to a thin silver chain. Mrs. Bell was a narrow woman with careful gray hair and eyes that had seen enough to stop being surprised. She walked May through service halls, linen rooms, stairwells, hidden pantry doors, and staff elevators that hummed behind walls guests never noticed. She explained which rooms needed 2 people, which guests tipped well, which ones should never be alone with staff, and which stains should be reported before anyone tried to scrub them. Then Mrs. Bell stopped at the end of a corridor where the carpet turned from burgundy to black. Ahead of them stood the glass elevator. It was beautiful, in a cold, watchful way, clear on all sides, framed in brass, with no visible buttons except a small black panel that reflected May's round face back at her. Beyond it, through a wall of glass, the city glittered far below. The elevator looked less like transportation and more like a test. "You do not clean this area," Mrs. Bell said. May looked at the spotless floor. "It looks clean already." "That is because no one lives long enough to make a mess there." May glanced at her, waiting for the smile that would turn the sentence into a joke. No smile came. Mrs. Bell touched the silver chain around May's neck. This card will open guest floors, staff corridors, laundry, storage, and service doors. It will not open the sky floor. Do not try. Do not ask someone else to try. Do not stand here looking curious when Mr. Calderone's men pass by. The sky floor, May repeated. That is what the staff calls it. Officially, it does not exist. May stared at the elevator. What is up there? Mrs. Bell's expression went flat. Nothing that concerns a woman who wants to keep her job. That should have been enough. For May, it usually was. She had spent her life learning how not to reach for locked doors. Locked doors belong to landlords, hospital billing offices, men in suits, people who could say no and make it sound like the natural order of the world. May survived by doing what was asked, noticing what mattered, and keeping her mouth closed until she got home. So she nodded, took her cleaning cart, and went to work. For the first weeks, she became part of the walls. She polished brass handles until they reflected tired versions of her face. She changed sheets in rooms that still held the warmth of strangers. She wiped lipstick from crystal glasses, scraped candle wax from private tables, and carried laundry bags heavy with silk, sweat, and secrets. Once, she found blood dried beneath the edge of a marble sink in the powder room outside the cigar lounge. Not much, just enough to turn the water pink when she scrubbed it loose. She did not ask whose it was. At the Vesper Club, questions were heavier than buckets. The men who worked near Nico Calderone were different from the guests. The guests performed power. Nico's men carried it like a weapon they hoped they would not be asked to use. They moved quietly, spoke little, and watched everything. Some had old scars, some had polished shoes. All of them lowered their voices when Nico appeared. May saw him for the first time from behind a half-open service door. He crossed the main lounge just after midnight, wearing a dark suit without a tie, his black hair pushed back as if he had run one impatient hand through it. He was not the biggest man in the room, but the room arranged itself around him anyway. Conversations thinned, laughter became careful. A senator who had been speaking loudly about loyalty suddenly found his drink very interesting. Nico did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He walked past the tables, and men who had once scared May by simply looking at her became nervous boys watching the principal pass. He was colder than she expected, not angry, not loud, cold, beautiful too, in the unfair way dangerous things often were. Sharp jaw, tired eyes, mouth that looked like it had forgotten softness on purpose. May disliked noticing that. Men like Nico Calderone did not exist for women like her to notice. They existed above glass elevators, behind locked doors, surrounded by people whose jobs were to make sure ordinary women never got close enough to matter. Still, May noticed other things. She noticed Nico stopped coming down every night. At first, he appeared twice a week, then once, then not at all. She noticed his men grew tenser when anyone mentioned the sky floor. She noticed the private chef sent covered trays up through the service lift, and sometimes those trays came back untouched. She noticed a laundry bag with expensive shirts came down one morning smelling faintly of antiseptic. She noticed that Nico's cousin, Dante Vale, began standing in places that used to belong to Nico. Dante was easy to like if a woman did not know better. He smiled with all his teeth and remembered names he planned to use later. He wore cream-colored suits in a club full of black, as if he wanted every camera to find him first. He called May sweetheart the first time she brought towels to the private card room, and when she did not blush, his eyes changed for half a second. Not enough for anyone else to see, enough for her. "You are new," he said. "Yes, sir." "Mrs. Bell hiring soft hearts now?" May kept her face blank. She mostly hires people who can clean bathrooms. One of the men near the bar coughed into his glass. Dante smiled wider, but it no longer reached his eyes. "Careful," he said gently. "This place teaches manners." May lowered her gaze the way people expected women like her to do, I hope it teaches overtime too." That got a laugh from the room. Dante laughed as well, but May felt his attention follow her all the way back to the service hall. After that, she avoided him when she could. But Dante was everywhere. In the main lounge, behind Nico's desk, near the elevator, speaking to managers like he already owned the keys. He gave orders in a voice wrapped in charm. Extra security for the vault, new delivery routes, staff access reviews, changes to the guest list. The men obeyed, but not comfortably. May saw that too. Fear had a sound when men tried to hide it. It lived in the pause before yes. The night everything changed began with a charity gala, and too much gold. The club had been rented for a fundraiser that pretended to support wounded veterans, but mostly gave rich people a reason to be photographed holding champagne. May spent the evening moving between guest suites and private dining rooms, collecting broken glasses and empty bottles while music floated through the halls like something too pretty to trust. Celebrities laughed near the windows. A judge slept upright in one of the side lounges. A minister spilled whiskey on his shirt and blamed the glass. By the time the main crowd thinned, May's feet ached so badly she had started promising each toe a separate apology. Mrs. Bell sent her to clean the top guest level after midnight. "Private dining room," she said, handing May a fresh stack of cloths. "Broken glass near the south wall. Be careful. And do not use the black corridor." "I remember." Mrs. Bell held her gaze for a moment. "Remember harder tonight." May almost asked why. Then she saw two of Dante's men pass behind Mrs. Bell, moving toward the back stairs instead of the guest elevators. Their jackets hung oddly at the hip. Guns, probably. May looked down at her cart and nodded. The private dining room was a mess in the polished way expensive people made messes. Half-melted candles, crushed roses, cigar ash on white plates, champagne spilled across the table like pale blood. May worked alone, grateful for the quiet. She gathered glasses first, dropping the broken pieces into a lined bucket. Outside the windows, the city spread beneath her in thousands of tiny lights, each one a person awake or dreaming or worrying over bills, not knowing that above them, men were deciding things in rooms with no names. She had just bent to pick up a shard near the wall when something crashed above her. Not a soft sound, not a dropped tray. Something heavy broke, followed by a muffled thud that ran through the ceiling. May froze with one hand on the floor. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then came a sound that made her skin tighten. A groan. Weak, human, hurt. May stood slowly. Her first thought was no. No, because she knew the rules. No, because curiosity did not pay hospital bills. No, because women like May survived by knowing which sounds belonged to them and which sounds belonged to other people's trouble. She looked toward the door. The hallway waited, empty and gold-lit. Beyond it, the black corridor led to the glass elevator. Another sound came from above, a scrape, a breath dragged through pain. May closed her eyes. Her mother used to say, conscience was a terrible roommate because it never let a person sleep. May wished her mother had been less wise. She could almost hear Mrs. Bell's voice. "Do not go near the sky floor." She could almost hear Dante's soft laugh. "This place teaches manners." She could almost hear her mother coughing into a towel and pretending it was nothing, because bills had made them both excellent liars. May walked to the hallway. At first, she told herself she was only checking, just looking. Just making sure no one was dead on the floor above her, while she polished candle wax beneath it. The black corridor felt longer than it had during training. The carpet swallowed the sound of her shoes. The glass elevator stood at the end, shining under dim lights, waiting like it had known she would come eventually. There were drops of blood near the doors. May stopped breathing for a moment. The blood was fresh. Dark red against black carpet. Not much, but enough to make every rumor about the sky floor feel suddenly alive. Torture chamber. Gambling room. Bodies. Men who vanished. She looked back once. No one came. No one told her to stop. Her regular keycard would not open the elevator. She knew that, but housekeeping survived on borrowed things, forgotten things, useful things. Earlier that evening, while cleaning the coat room, May had found a black staff card beneath a velvet bench. No name, no department, higher access than hers, judging by the color. She had meant to give it to Mrs. Bell. She had placed it in her apron pocket and then forgotten when a guest vomited into a silver ice bucket. Now it felt heavy against her thigh. May took it out. "This is how stupid people die," she whispered. Then she pressed the card to the panel. The elevator opened. No alarm, no shout, just a soft chime that sounded far too polite for the mistake she was making. May stepped inside, clutching her cleaning cloth like it could protect her. The doors closed, and the club disappeared beneath her. The elevator rose through darkness. City lights spread around her on all sides, distant and glittering. May saw herself reflected in the glass. Round cheeks, dark curls escaping her clip, uniform too tight at the hips, eyes too wide. She did not look like a woman entering a legend. She looked like a housekeeper who should have stayed with her cart. The doors opened onto warm, humid air. May blinked. The sky floor was not what anyone had imagined. It was not a dungeon. It was not a casino. It was a hidden world behind tinted glass, filled with plants taller than doorways, dark wood floors, low lights, and windows that made the city feel like it had fallen away. Tropical leaves brushed the ceiling. Water whispered somewhere in the shadows. A bar curved along one wall, shattered glass glittering across the floor beneath it. The place smelled of whiskey, blood, and expensive flowers. Then May saw him. Nico Calderone lay beside the broken bar cart, one hand pressed hard against his side. His white shirt was soaked red beneath his open jacket. His face was pale, his hair damp with sweat, and a dark stain spread beneath his ribs where the fabric had torn. A second wound marked his shoulder, badly bandaged, the cloth around it wet again. For one impossible second, May simply stared. The man who made rooms go silent was on the floor like any other wounded body, the city's monster, bleeding alone behind glass. She took one step toward him. His hand moved. The gun was pointed at her before she could scream. May stopped so fast her shoes slipped slightly on the polished floor. Nico's eyes opened. They were fever-bright, unfocused, and still terrifying. "Who sent you?" he asked. His voice was rough, but the danger in it survived the blood loss. "No one," May said, lifting both hands slowly. "I heard a crash. Wrong answer. It is the only answer I have." His finger tightened near the trigger. "Dante?" May's stomach dropped at the name. "No. Do not lie to me. I clean bathrooms for a living. I do not have the energy to lie to dying men with guns." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Pain made it hard to tell. "You should not be here," he said. "I know." "Then leave." May looked at the blood spreading beneath him. "You will die. That is not your problem." "No," she said softly. "But it will become mine if I walk away and spend the rest of my life knowing I left a man bleeding on designer tile because I was afraid of an elevator." His mouth tightened, almost like he wanted to laugh but no longer had enough blood for it. "You think that is courage?" "I think it is bad timing." The gun trembled, only slightly, but May saw it. He was weaker than he wanted her to know. His skin had a gray cast beneath the warm lights, and his breathing came too shallow. If he had been hiding up here for days, then the whispers downstairs suddenly made sense. The untouched trays, the antiseptic, Dante standing too close to power. May swallowed and took one careful step forward. The gun lifted again. "Do not." She froze. Fear moved through her so sharply she felt it in her teeth. But beneath the fear, something stubborn rose. Maybe it had been there all along, built from years of being ignored, dismissed, underestimated, charged late fees, denied extensions, and told to be grateful for scraps. Maybe a woman could only be treated as invisible for so long, before invisibility turned into a kind of armor. "You can shoot me," May said. Her voice shook, but it held. "But then you will die alone, and Dante Vale will walk downstairs wearing your club like a new suit." Nico went very still. For the first time, he looked at her properly. Not at the uniform, not at the soft curve of her body, not at the fact that she did not belong in his hidden glass kingdom. He looked at her face, her hands, the stolen keycard still hanging between her fingers, and the fear she had not managed to hide. "You know my cousin," he said. "I know he smiles too much for a man everyone hates." A breath left Nico. It might have been pain. It might have been approval. "What is your name?" May hesitated. Names were dangerous at the Vesper Club. Names made people findable. But she had already passed every safe line in the building. "May Rivera. Housekeeping." "Yes. You are shaking, May Rivera. You are bleeding, Nico Calderone. Neither of us looks impressive right now." For a long second, the gun stayed between them. Then Nico lowered it. The movement seemed to cost him. His arm dropped to the floor, and his eyes closed as if the room had tilted. May moved before she could change her mind. She crossed the glass-strewn floor, careful but fast, and knelt beside him. Up close, he looked worse. Sweat dampened his collar. Blood soaked his shirt and stained his hand. The knife wound at his side was ugly, deep enough to frighten her even before she noticed the older gunshot injury near his shoulder had reopened. May had cleaned enough guest rooms to understand blood as a stain. This was different. This was warm life, leaving a body one pulse at a time. "I am not a nurse," she whispered. "No," Nico said through clenched teeth. "But you are here." "That is not the same thing. It will have to be." He nodded weakly toward the far wall. Cabinet behind the painting, medical kit, blue case. May looked where he pointed. A large abstract painting hung between two palm trees, all gold and black lines. She hurried to it, found the hidden latch after one frantic moment, and pulled open a cabinet stocked with supplies that looked far more serious than bandages from a hotel bathroom. Gauze, antiseptic, syringes, vials, surgical thread, gloves, painkillers, things May had seen in hospitals but never touched. Her hands trembled harder. "Nico," she said, hating how small her voice sounded, "I cannot do this." "Yes, you can. You do not know that. I know you came up here when every rule told you not to. That might only prove I am stupid." "No," he said, and his eyes opened again. "Stupid people come for secrets. You came for a sound." May stood there with the blue case in her hands, and something about that sentence reached her in a place she had not expected. He was not kind. Nothing about him was soft, but he had seen the difference. In a club full of people who looked through her, Nico Calderone, half dead on the floor, had noticed why she came. She knelt beside him again and opened the case. He talked her through it one step at a time. Gloves first. Pressure on the side wound. Cut the shirt. Clean around the edges. Not too much liquid. Keep pressure. Check the shoulder. Do not touch the black vial. Use the clear one. No, not that needle. The smaller one. His voice faded in and out, rough with pain, but his mind remained terrifyingly precise. May listened because listening was something she knew how to do. Her mother's medication schedule, hospital billing instructions, Mrs. Bell's room codes, guest preferences, men's lies, women's silences. May had always survived by paying attention. When she pressed gauze to his side, Nico's whole body went rigid. "I know," she whispered. "I know. I am sorry. Do not apologize for pain you did not cause." She looked at him quickly. His eyes were closed again. The words should not have mattered. They did. May kept working. She cleaned what she could. She tied off what he told her to tie. When she had to stitch part of the wound, her stomach turned so badly she thought she might faint, but Nico's hand closed around her wrist before she could pull away. "Look at me," he said. "I cannot. Look at me, May." She did. His face was pale enough to scare her. His grip was weak, but his gaze held. "You are not hurting me," he said. "You are keeping me alive." May swallowed. "Then stop bleeding like you are arguing with me." That time he did laugh. Barely. A broken sound, small and dangerous because it felt human. She finished with clumsy stitches and bandages that would never impress a doctor, but might hold until one could be found. By the time she was done, her uniform was stained, her knees ached, and her hands smelled like antiseptic and blood. Nico lay back against the floor, breathing a little easier. The gun remained near his hand. May noticed he had not reached for it again. "You need a hospital," she said. "No hospital." Of course. Why would a man with a knife wound want medical care? That would be too reasonable. If I leave this floor weak, Dante finishes what he started. May sat back on her heels. The room seemed colder now despite the humid air. He did this. Nico's jaw tightened. Someone opened a private route. Only family knew. Someone moved my guards. Someone sent a doctor I did not call. And you think Dante? I know Dante. May thought of the cream suit, the gentle voice, the eyes that went flat when she answered too quickly. He has been giving orders downstairs. Nico's gaze sharpened despite the fever. What orders? May hesitated. He saw it. Tell me. I am housekeeping. I hear things because people think mops make women deaf. May. He changed security near the vault. He asked for staff access reviews. He has men using the back stairs after midnight. Mrs. Bell is afraid, but she will not say it. Your regular men look like they are waiting for a storm, and the chef has been sending food up here that comes back untouched. Nico watched her in silence. May shifted, suddenly aware of herself again. Her body, her blood-stained uniform, her place in the room. What? You notice a great deal for someone who claims to clean bathrooms. I never said I only clean bathrooms. I said people think that is all I do. His eyes held hers, and for the first time since she had entered the sky floor, May felt something other than fear. Not safety. That would have been foolish. Nico Calderone was not safe. But she felt recognized, and that was almost worse. You cannot tell anyone I am alive, he said. May stared at him. Excuse me? If Dante learns I survived, he will send more men. If my enemies learn I am weak, they will tear the city open trying to reach me. If my own people panic, the club becomes a battlefield. That sounds terrible. Also not my problem. It became your problem when you used that elevator. May stood so fast the room spun a little. No, do not do that. Do not make this my fault because I chose not to let you bleed out under a houseplant. Nico tried to push himself up. Pain stopped him. Dante will ask how I survived. He will look at cameras, staff movements, missing supplies. You are already part of this. Then erase the cameras. I can, if I stay conscious long enough. You are impossible. I have been called worse. May looked toward the elevator, then back at him. Downstairs, her cleaning cart waited beside broken champagne glasses. Her mother's bills waited at home. Her whole small, difficult life waited on the other side of one terrible choice. She could walk out. She could tell Mrs. Bell she had felt sick and gone home. She could pretend she had never seen him. Maybe Dante would never know. Maybe Nico would survive on his own. Maybe the city would continue glittering and cruel, and May Rivera would keep polishing its fingerprints away. Then Nico's breath hitched, and the bandage at his side darkened. May closed her eyes. I hate this job, she whispered. No, you do not. Nico said faintly. You hate that you are good at it. She looked down at him. He should not have understood that. Men like him were not supposed to understand anything about women like her. But there it was again, that terrible accuracy. What do you need? She asked. For a moment, his expression changed. Not soft exactly. Softer than before. Painkillers, he said. Food, clean clothes, information, and a woman everyone underestimates. May gave a tired laugh with no humor in it. Lucky you. No, Nico said, his voice low and rough as his eyes closed again. Lucky I was found by one. May stood in the hidden garden above the city with blood on her hands and the most dangerous man she had ever met lying at her feet. Somewhere below them, Dante Vale was smiling, like the club already belonged to him. Somewhere beyond the windows, dawn was still hours away, and May understood with a cold, quiet certainty that the woman who had stepped into the forbidden elevator could not simply step back out unchanged. May understood with a cold, quiet certainty that the woman who had stepped into the forbidden elevator could not simply step back out unchanged. She wanted to believe she still had a choice, but choices had a way of shrinking once blood was involved. Downstairs, she was just May Rivera from housekeeping, the woman who knew which guest rooms needed extra towels and which rich men left lipstick on glasses they had not used. Up here, above the city, with Nico Calderone barely conscious at her feet, she had become something else. A witness, a problem, maybe even a weapon, though she did not feel like one. She felt like a tired woman with aching knees, a stained uniform, and a heart beating too loudly in a room full of glass. The first thing she did was clean the floor. It was a foolish thing, maybe, but it was also the only thing she knew how to do without asking permission. Nico watched her from the low sofa she had helped him reach, his face pale and damp, one hand pressed over the bandage at his side. May moved around the broken bar cart with a towel and a bucket of warm water, gathering shards of glass, wiping blood from the wood floor, turning chaos into something less obvious. She cleaned because Dante could not find evidence. She cleaned because panic had nowhere to go if her hands were busy. She cleaned because if she stopped moving, she might remember that she was alone in a hidden safe house with a wounded mafia boss and no idea how to leave this story alive. You should rest, Nico said. May did not look up. You first. His mouth moved slightly. I am resting. You are bleeding through my work. That sounds like a complaint. It is a professional review. For the first time, a faint warmth touched his eyes. It vanished quickly, swallowed by pain, but May saw it. She hated that she cared. She tied the trash bag tight, pushed the broken cart behind a wall of plants, and washed her hands in the small kitchen sink until the water ran clear. Even then, she could still smell blood under the soap. Nico told her where to find a private control panel behind a cabinet near the windows. His voice faded twice while giving instructions, but May followed every word. The security footage from the sky floor disappeared with 3 taps and a passcode he made her repeat back. The elevator log was harder. She had to delete her access, then cover the missing line with a maintenance error. Nico talked her through it, patient in the way only people in terrible pain can be patient, because anger costs too much strength. When it was done, May stood with both hands on the edge of the counter and stared at the dark screen. That is a crime, right? Nico closed his eyes. Several. Lovely. You came to a mafia club for legal clarity. I came for health insurance and overtime. That was your first mistake. No, she said quietly. My first mistake was being born into a world where my mother's medicine costs more than rent. Nico opened his eyes again. He did not answer right away. May wished he had made a sharp remark. Silence was more dangerous. It made room for things to be heard. The hum of the hidden air system, the water falling softly somewhere among the plants, his breathing, uneven but steadier than before, her own breath, still scared. "You need money," he said. May turned. "Everyone needs money." "Not like that." "You do not know me." "No," Nico said, "but I know the voice of someone counting days." That took something from her. Not much, just enough. She looked away before he could see it happen. "My mother is sick. I pay what I can. That is all. I can help." There it was. The sentence powerful men always thought sounded generous. May laughed once, flat and tired. "Do not." His gaze sharpened. "Do not what?" "Do not say help like it does not come with a chain." "I did not offer a chain. Men like you do not have to. They just hold out their hand, and the chain appears around everyone else." Nico was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Fair." May looked back at him, surprised despite herself. He shifted against the sofa, jaw tightening as pain moved through him. "I will not buy you, May Rivera. You could not afford me." This time his eyes almost smiled before the rest of him failed to. Good. She should have left after that. She should have taken the elevator down, finished the dining room, and let whatever happened next belong to men who wore guns like accessories. But Nico needed food, clean clothes, more bandages, and information. He also needed someone Dante would not suspect immediately. That was the dangerous part. Dante noticed everything he considered valuable. May had built a life around not being considered valuable. She returned to the guest floor just before dawn. Her cleaning cart still waited where she had left it. The broken champagne glasses sat in their bucket. The candles had burned lower. Nothing had changed, and everything had. May finished the room with blood hidden beneath her sleeves and a stolen keycard tucked inside her bra, because no one searched fat women carefully, unless they had already decided to hate them. By 6, she had dropped 3 towels into laundry, filed a fake maintenance note about the top-level hallway, and told Mrs. Bell she had cut her hand on glass. Mrs. Bell looked at the bandage wrapped around May's palm, then at the private elevator down the hall, then back at May. "How badly?" Mrs. Bell asked. May held her breath. "Not bad." Mrs. Bell's eyes stayed on her. "Cuts can get infected if a person keeps opening them." May understood then that Mrs. Bell knew something. Maybe not everything. Enough. The older woman took a small tin from her pocket and placed it on May's cart. "Antibiotic ointment," she said, "for cuts." May looked down at the tin. It was too heavy for ointment. Later, in the staff restroom, May opened it and found 2 sealed pain tablets, a tiny roll of medical tape, and a folded piece of paper with 3 words written in careful script. Cameras blinked twice. After that, May learned the building all over again. The Vesper Club had always been a maze, but now the maze had a pulse. She learned which service stair had a camera with a 3-second blind spot. She learned the laundry chute could carry more than towels if something was wrapped deep enough. She learned Dante's men smoked behind the kitchen at 1:30, played cards in the security office at 3 o'clock, and stopped paying attention to housekeeping carts if the woman pushing one looked tired enough. May looked tired all the time. It finally became useful. For 5 days, she kept Nico alive. She smuggled up soup in coffee thermoses, clean shirts folded inside linen bags, bandages wrapped in stacks of napkins, and painkillers hidden in the hollow space beneath a cart drawer. He hated needing help. May could tell by the way his hand curled when he could not button his own shirt, by the way his voice went colder whenever dizziness forced him to sit, by the way he looked toward the elevator whenever sounds rose from below. A man like Nico Calderone had built his life around control, and now he could not cross a room without leaning against the wall. May did not pity him. That seemed to matter to him more than kindness. "You are doing it wrong," he said on the 3rd night while she changed the bandage on his shoulder. May paused. "Would you like to bleed in a more correct way? The tape pulls. The tape is keeping you closed." It is still wrong. May pressed the strip down with more care than force. You are a terrible patient. I am not a patient. You are lying on a sofa with a fever, while a housekeeper smuggles you soup. Pick a prettier word if you want, but the facts remain. His eyes held hers. You speak to me like you forget who I am. No, May said. I speak to you like I remember you cannot currently stand without seeing stars. Nico looked away first. It felt like a victory she was not sure she wanted. As days passed, the fear between them changed shape. It did not disappear. May was not foolish enough to feel safe in Nico's world. But fear became mixed with other things. Curiosity, irritation, a strange quiet comfort when she found him awake and breathing. He began asking about her mother, not with rich man sympathy, but with exact questions. Which hospital? Which doctor? Which medication? May refused at first. He did not push. That made refusing harder. She finally told him small pieces, while stirring powdered broth into hot water because the chef's food was too rich for his fever. Her mother's name was Lucia. She liked old game shows. She hated hospital gowns. She lied about pain when bills were on the table. Nico listened like each detail mattered. What about your father? He asked once. May laughed softly. He believed parenting was a guest appearance. I am sorry. Do not be. He would have ruined the furniture. That made Nico smile for half a second. It was not the cold smile May had seen downstairs, the one that made men straighten in their chairs. This one was tired, private, almost surprised to find itself alive. He told her very little about himself at first, only what the war required. Dante had always wanted what Nico built, but lacked the patience to build anything himself. Dante was charming, because charm was cheaper than loyalty. He had friends in the city, judges who owed him favors, businessmen who preferred a weaker Calderone family, and younger men who thought cruelty looked like leadership. Nico's mistake, he said, had been trusting blood more than pattern. Family makes people stupid, May said. Nico looked at her. Experience? Observing rich people at brunch. Ah, and a few relatives who borrow money and return opinions. He almost laughed again. She began to like earning those almost laws. That was dangerous too. On the 6th day, Dante cornered her in the laundry room. May felt him before she saw him. The room seemed to lose air. She was sorting sheets near the industrial dryers, steam making the walls shine, when his reflection appeared in the round metal door. Cream suit, gold watch, easy smile. 2 men waited in the hall beyond him. May, he said warmly. She kept folding. Mr. Vale, you work late. Sheets do not fold themselves. No, he said. I suppose they do not. He walked closer, slow enough to seem casual. May kept her hands busy, smoothing one corner, then another. She had learned that fear should not be still if you could give it a task. You know, Dante said, I admire women like you. May placed another folded sheet on the stack. That must be new for you. His smile sharpened. Invisible women. Useful women. Women who move through rooms full of secrets and never understand the value of what they hear. May looked up then. That does not sound like admiration. It is practical respect. His gaze moved over her body in a way that felt like a hand she wanted to slap away. Men notice the beautiful ones. They watch them. They guard their tongues. But a woman like you, soft, quiet, easy to dismiss. People say things near you because they believe you are part of the furniture. May's face stayed calm. Inside, something hot and bright opened its eyes. Dante stepped close enough that she could smell mint on his breath. Have you noticed anything interesting, sweetheart? May lowered her gaze. Not because she was beaten, because she knew what he wanted to see. I noticed stains. What kind? Wine, lipstick, blood if guests are rude with glasses. And near the sky floor? Her fingers tightened in the sheet once. She loosened them before he could see. I do not clean there. No one cleans there lately. Dante's voice softened. Strange, isn't it? Rich people like privacy, and housekeepers like money. May looked up slowly. Dante smiled. Your mother's bills are not small. I checked. St. Agatha's, correct? Lung specialist. Pharmacy debt. Overdue balance. The laundry room seemed to tilt. May felt the old familiar rage of being found through paperwork. A poor person's secrets were never hidden well. They lived in billing offices, due dates, collections calls, forms filled out in blue ink. What do you want? She asked. There, honesty. Dante reached out and touched a folded towel on the stack, ruining its clean edge. I want to know if my cousin is alive. May let confusion move across her face, slow and believable. Mr. Calderone? Do not play too dumb. It insults both of us. I have not seen him in weeks. That is not what I asked. May looked at the doorway. His men watched without expression. If I knew anything, she said carefully, telling you would be dangerous. Dante's smile became soft again. Not telling me is worse. He leaned close, his voice dropping. Women like you survive by being useful. Be useful to me, and I can make your mother's bills disappear. Refuse, and maybe her file gets delayed. Maybe her prescription needs approval again. Maybe one of those sweet nurses loses a form. Hospitals are terrible places for paperwork. May did not move. She thought of Nico saying Dante would target her too. She thought of her mother pretending not to cough. She thought of every man who had ever discovered that love was the easiest leash to pull. Then she looked at Dante with wet eyes she did not have to fake. I do not know anything. For a moment, he believed the tears. She saw it. He liked them. They made him feel tall. He patted her cheek with 2 fingers, then started noticing. After he left, May stood in the laundry room until the dryers buzzed. Then she picked up the towel he had touched and folded it again perfectly. Her hands did not shake until she reached the service stairs. When she told Nico, he went silent in a way that frightened her more than shouting would have. He sat on the edge of the sofa, face pale, bandage hidden beneath a clean black shirt she had stolen from his wardrobe. The fever had broken the day before, but he was still too weak. His eyes, however, were clear, cold, awake. He used your mother, Nico said. Yes, I told you this would reach you. You did. I can move her tonight. No. His gaze cut to hers. May. No. She stood near the glass wall with the city behind her. You do not get to fix my life by taking it over. That is not what I am doing. That is exactly what powerful men always think they are not doing. His jaw tightened. Dante threatened her. And I am telling you not to make choices for me because another man threatened her. Do you hear the difference? Silence spread between them. May expected anger. She expected the old, cold boss to rise in him. The man downstairs feared. For a second, she saw the fight in his face. He wanted to order. He wanted to move pieces on a board and call it protection. But then he looked at her, really looked, and something in him stepped back. What do you want? He asked. The question was so simple it almost hurt. May folded her arms around herself. I want her watched, not moved. I want her doctor left alone unless I ask. I want Dante stopped. And I want to keep choosing what happens to my own family. Nico nodded once. Done. That easy? No, he said. But still done. That was the moment May became afraid of how much she could love him, not because he could destroy men, not because he had money or power or a hidden kingdom above the city, because he had wanted to control the situation and chose to listen instead. For May, who had been talked over by doctors, landlords, managers, guests, and men who believed her body made her less worthy of space, being listened to felt more intimate than a touch. Nico's strength returned slowly, but Dante's suspicion moved faster. The club tightened like a fist. Staff keycards were checked, deliveries were searched, Two of Nico's loyal guards vanished from the schedule. Mrs. Bell began leaving small warnings in ordinary places. A red ribbon tied around a linen cart meant the service elevator was watched. A coffee cup turned upside down near the pantry meant Dante's men were in the kitchen. May carried the messages upstairs and began to understand that the club had not only belonged to Nico because men feared him, it had belonged to him because people like Mrs. Bell had chosen him over men like Dante. That kind of loyalty could not be bought. It had to be earned quietly, over years, in ways no guest would ever notice. On the 8th night, Nico told May the final move was coming. Dante had called a midnight meeting in the underground cigar vault, the oldest room in the building, sealed behind the wine wall and lined with private safes. The family money records were stored there, along with blackmail files, debt ledgers, and documents that could ruin half the city before breakfast. If Dante gained control of the vault and convinced the captains that Nico was dead or too weak to rule, the takeover would become official. By morning, every man still loyal to Nico would be hunted. "I need a ledger," Nico said. "Black leather, silver corner guards, hidden behind the wine wall, 3rd row from the bottom, between 2 bottles of Barolo from 1988. May stared at him. "That is very specific. I like knowing where my secrets sleep." "And the weapon?" "Same compartment. Of course there is a weapon in the wine wall. It is a practical wall." May pressed her hands over her face for a moment. "I hate rich people architecture." Nico almost smiled, then winced as he stood. He had insisted on dressing fully for the first time. Black suit, open collar, shoulder tight beneath the jacket. He looked like a ghost, trying to pass for a king. "You are not coming with me," May said. "I am not asking permission." "No, but you are currently sweating because you put on pants." His eyes narrowed. "Careful. You first." They stared at each other, and the fear beneath the argument softened both of them. Nico reached for the back of the chair, not because he wanted to, but because he needed the support. May saw the truth. So did he. "You cannot make it through the service tunnels," she said quietly. "I know. I can." "I know that too." The words landed between them. This was why he had told her, not because he wanted to send her, because the story had already chosen its cruel shape. May walked to the cabinet and took the stolen black keycard. "If I do this, you do not move until I return." Nico's face darkened. "If you are caught, if I am caught, you will stay alive long enough to make it matter." He looked at her with something fierce and helpless in his eyes. "May." She waited. His voice lowered. "Come back." It was not an order. That was what nearly broke her. "I plan to," she said. The service tunnels beneath the Vesper Club were older than the tower above them. May had used them twice before with Mrs. Bell, but never alone, never at night, and never while carrying the future of a criminal empire inside her housekeeping apron. Pipes ran along the ceiling. The walls smelled of dust, stone, and old smoke. Above her, the club hummed with midnight music. Below, her steps sounded too loud. She moved slowly, counting doors the way Nico had taught her. Laundry access, cold storage, maintenance, wine cellar. At the wine wall, she waited until 2 guards passed, talking about Dante like he was already boss. One said Nico had grown weak. The other said weak men died, and smart men changed sides before the funeral. May stood in the dark behind stacked crates, holding her breath until their footsteps faded. Then she slipped into the cellar. The wine wall rose before her, polished and ridiculous. Hundreds of bottles angled beneath soft lights. May found the 3rd row from the bottom, counted across to the old Barolo, and pressed the hidden latch. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then the panel opened with a soft click. Inside lay the black ledger, a small pistol, and a sealed envelope marked with Nico's initials. May took all 3. The pistol made her stomach turn. She had never held one before. It felt too heavy for its size, like fear given shape. She wrapped it in a towel and tucked it beneath the folded napkins in her cart. The ledger she hid under clean tablecloths. The envelope she slipped into her pocket because something told her it mattered. She had almost reached the service door when Dante spoke behind her. May. Her whole body went cold. She turned slowly. Dante stood near the wine wall with 4 men behind him. No smile this time, no charm. Just the flat, satisfied look of a man who had finally watched a trap close. "You really were useful," he said. May kept both hands on the cart handle. "I am cleaning." At midnight, in the private cellar, with a cart full of tablecloths no one requested. Guests spill things. Do they also hide ledgers? His eyes dropped to the cart. May thought of running. There was nowhere to run. She thought of screaming. No one would come except more of his men. So she did the one thing people had expected from her all her life. She became harmless. Her shoulders rounded. Her eyes filled. Her voice went small. "Please," she whispered. Dante relaxed. "Only a little. Enough. I told you women like you survive by being useful," he said. "And look at you, finally learning." He reached into the cart and removed the ledger from beneath the tablecloths. His expression lit with triumph. Then he found the wrapped pistol and laughed softly. "Oh, sweetheart." One of his men grabbed May's arm. She did not fight. Not yet. Dante took her through the hidden door to the cigar vault, and the room beyond went silent when they entered. It was low-ceilinged and smoky, with dark leather chairs, green-shaded lamps, and a long table surrounded by men whose faces May had seen only in passing. Captains, money men, old friends, new traitors. Some looked at Dante with loyalty. Some looked at him with fear. Some looked at May as if she were a stain dragged onto a rug. Dante tossed the ledger onto the table. "Found our little thief." May stumbled when the guard shoved her forward but kept her balance. Her arm hurt where he held it. Dante stood at the head of the table like he had been born there. "My cousin is dead," he said to the room, "or close enough that the difference no longer matters. While we waited, his staff stole from us. His enemies circled us. His silence weakened us. I am ending that tonight." One older man frowned. "Where is the body?" Dante's smile thinned. "Do you need to kiss his ring after he rots?" The room tightened. May understood then that Dante did not have all of them. Not yet. He had fear, but not faith. He had the ledger, but not the crown. Dante turned back to her. "Tell them who sent you." May looked at the men around the table. Every face waited. "No one," she said. Dante's hand struck the table so hard the lamps shook. May flinched but did not step back. "Wrong answer." She said no one. The voice came from behind them. Not loud, not rushed, rougher than it used to be. But alive. Every man in the room turned. Nico Calderone stood in the doorway of the cigar vault. One hand braced against the frame, his black suit buttoned over fresh bandages, his face pale enough to reveal the cost of standing. But his eyes were not weak. His eyes moved across the room, and men who had been ready to follow Dante suddenly remembered who had taught the city to fear silence. For one breath, no one moved. Then Dante laughed. It was not a good sound. "Cousin," he said. "You should be in bed." Nico stepped into the room. May saw the effort it took. She also saw Dante see it. "And you," Nico said, "should have checked the knife went deep enough." The room changed. Men shifted, hands lowered toward jackets. Dante's smile flickered. "You hear him?" Dante said to the table. "He can barely stand. This is what you want leading us? A wounded man hidden upstairs while a housekeeper plays nurse?" Nico's gaze went to May. For 1 second, the whole room disappeared around them. There was anger in him, yes. Fear too, though only she knew how to see it. Then his eyes moved to the guard holding her arm. "Let her go," Nico said. The man did. May pulled her arm back and straightened. Dante noticed. His face hardened. "She has the proof," Nico said. Dante's eyes snapped to the ledger on the table. "I have the ledger." "No," May said softly. Every eye turned to her. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the sealed envelope from the wine wall. Dante's expression emptied. Nico's mouth curved faintly. "You always did grab the obvious thing first." Dante lunged, but two of the older men moved faster, blocking him before he reached May. Nico nodded once. May opened the envelope with fingers that were only shaking a little now. Inside were copies of transfer records, private messages, guard rotations, doctor payments, and signed orders connecting Dante to the attack. There was also a small drive taped to the inside fold. May placed everything on the table. "This is what he wanted hidden," she said. The older man who had asked about the body picked up the first page. His eyes moved down the lines. Then he looked at Dante, and the respect was gone. Dante tried charm next. Men like him always did. He spoke of protection, weakness, necessary change. He said Nico had lost perspective. He said the family needed a leader who could be loved by the city, not only feared by it. He said May had been manipulated, that she was a lonely employee dazzled by attention. That was his mistake, not the lie, the direction of it. Nico's voice went quiet. "Say one more word about her." Dante smiled. There he is, the wounded king defending his maid. May felt the room look at her again. In another life, she might have shrunk. In this one, she stepped beside Nico, not behind him, beside him. "I am not his maid," she said. "I am the woman who found the man you failed to kill." The room went silent. Nico looked at her then, and something unreadable moved across his face. Pride, maybe. Wonder, maybe both. Dante's anger finally showed fully. Without charm, he was smaller, still dangerous but smaller. His men looked at the papers, then at the captains, then at Nico. Loyalty began moving through the room like a tide changing direction. "You think this ends with paper?" Dante snapped. "No," Nico said. "It ends with everyone seeing you clearly." One by one, Dante's men stepped back from him. Not all with courage, some with calculation. It did not matter. The takeover died in their silence. Dante reached for the gun inside his jacket, but the older captain already had his weapon raised. Nico did not flinch. May did. Nico noticed and shifted half an inch closer, not in front of her, just near enough to remind the room she was not alone. Dante was disarmed. Then he was held. His smile was gone now, replaced by disbelief so raw it almost looked young. "You would choose a housekeeper over blood?" he asked Nico. Nico looked at him for a long moment. "No, I choose loyalty over blood. You never understood the difference." They took Dante away through the side door. May did not ask where. She was not innocent enough to believe he would simply be fired, but she also did not want the details. Some doors did not need opening, not all of them. The room emptied slowly after that. Men came to Nico, lowered their heads, offered apologies dressed as respect. Nico accepted none of them warmly. He gave orders, quiet ones, exact ones: secure the club, find every man Dante paid, protect Mrs. Bell, send a doctor to the sky floor, watch St. Agatha's, but do not touch Lucia Rivera's care unless May asks. At that, May looked at him. He did not look back. Not yet, maybe because he knew if he did, everyone would see too much. By dawn, the club was quiet again, but it was not the same quiet. This one came after thunder. Nico's doctor stitched what May had only held together and muttered angrily about stubborn men and infected wounds. Mrs. Bell brought May a clean uniform, then hugged her so quickly May almost thought she imagined it. May called her mother from the staff restroom, and cried silently when Lucia answered, sleepy and annoyed, very much alive. May told her she was working late. Her mother told her to eat something. Somehow that nearly broke her more than the vault had. When May returned to the sky floor, Nico was standing by the glass despite the doctor's orders. Dawn had begun to lift over the city, pale gold spreading across the rooftops, washing the windows in soft light. He wore a fresh shirt open at the throat, his face still tired, his body held upright by will more than strength. He did not turn when she entered. "You should be lying down," May said. "You should be asleep. I never said I was good at taking advice." "Neither did I." She walked to stand a few feet from him. Below them, the Vesper Club looked almost peaceful. Empty terraces, quiet streets, the first cars moving through morning. A city that had no idea how close it had come to burning in the night. Nico looked at her reflection in the glass. "Your mother's bills have been paid." May went still. He continued before she could speak. "Not by me." She turned slowly. "Nico. By the Calderone Employee Emergency Fund, which Mrs. Bell has apparently been running for 12 years without telling me how badly underfunded it was. I corrected the account. She approved the payment. Your mother's care remains your family's decision." May stared at him, searching for the chain. There had to be one. A condition, a quiet claim, a hidden hook, but his face held only exhaustion and something like hope, though he would probably rather reopen a wound than call it that. "You found a loophole," she said. "I found a door that did not lock behind you." Her throat tightened. That was almost sweet. "I will recover." She laughed softly, and the sound felt strange after so much fear. Nico turned from the window fully then. "I meant what I said. I can offer you protection." May's smile faded. "And work," he added. "Real work. Not because you helped me, because you see what other people miss. Mrs. Bell wants you moved into club operations. Access audits, staff routes, inventory, security blind spots. You can refuse." May looked at him. "And if I refuse everything?" "Then you leave with your last paycheck, your mother's bills settled through a fund you did not ask me for, and my word that Dante's remaining people will not touch you." "Your word?" "Yes. Is that worth something?" "In this city," he said. "It is one of the few things I cannot afford to cheapen." May believed him. That scared her, more than doubting him would have. "And us?" she asked before courage could leave. The question changed the air. Nico did not move toward her. That mattered. He stayed where he was, wounded and powerful and careful, with dawn touching the hard lines of his face. "Us," he said slowly, "is not a debt, not payment, not protection, not gratitude. If there is an us, May, it is only because you choose it after you are free to walk away." May looked down at her hands. They were clean now, but she could still remember the blood. She remembered stepping into the elevator, the gun pointed at her, Dante's hand on her cheek, the vault going silent when Nico appeared. She remembered every version of herself people had mistaken for weak, too fat to be wanted, too ordinary to be noticed, too poor to say no, too soft to survive sharp rooms. Then she looked at Nico and realized he was not offering to make her visible. She had already done that herself. He was only refusing to look away. May stepped closer, not all the way into his arms, but close enough that he had to lower his eyes to hers. "I am still a housekeeper," she said. "Yes, I am still fat." His brow drew together, not with discomfort, but with confusion that she thought it needed saying. "Yes, I am still practical." Painfully. "I will argue with you." I assumed. "I will not be hidden on your sky floor like a secret you visit after dark. No, I will not belong to you." Nico's voice softened. "No." May studied him. "But I might stand beside you." Something in his face shifted then. the great cold boss of the Vesper Club, looked, for one unguarded moment, like a man who had been offered mercy he did not know how to hold. "I would be honored," he said. May smiled a little. That sounded very formal. "I am trying not to frighten you. You already pointed a gun at me. The bar is low." He laughed then. Quietly, carefully, because laughing still hurt. May liked the sound enough to worry about herself. Outside, the sun lifted higher, spilling gold across the glass, across the plants, across the floor she had scrubbed clean the night everything began. The city woke below them, unaware that power had changed hands above its head. Downstairs, staff would whisper, guests would return, politicians and celebrities and criminals would keep pretending not to know each other. The Vesper Club would open again by evening, polished, perfumed, and dangerous as ever. But May Rivera would never again move through it as part of the furniture. She stood beside Nico Calderone as dawn filled the sky floor, still soft, still practical, still carrying the body the world had taught her to apologize for. Only now, that body had walked through forbidden doors, hidden a mafia boss, outsmarted a traitor, and carried proof through a room full of men who had expected her to tremble. She had entered the glass elevator as a housekeeper, with bills in her pocket and fear in her throat. She ended the night as the woman who saved the most feared man in the city and helped him take back his empire. Nico reached for her hand, then stopped before touching her. May noticed. Of course she did. After a moment, she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers gently, as if power had finally learned how to ask. Below them, the Vesper Club glittered in the morning light. Above it, behind walls of glass and leaves, May carried the most dangerous secret in the city. Nico Calderone was alive. Dante Vale had fallen, and the woman everyone underestimated had become the one person the mafia boss trusted most. Not because she belonged to him, but because when every locked door in the city told her to stay away, May Rivera had chosen to step inside. The most feared man in Chicago could make judges lower their eyes, make police captains forget names, and make powerful men rethink their prayers before they crossed him. But every night, inside his guarded mansion by the lake, Salvatore Bellini was defeated by the soft sound of his little girl crying in her sleep. His empire stretched across the city like a shadow, touching ports, clubs, construction yards, private banks, and quiet back rooms where men spoke softly because they knew his name carried consequences. Outside his gates, Salvatore was control. He was silence. He was the final answer. But inside the cold stone walls of Bellini House, where the windows faced the dark water and the wind moved through the trees like whispers from the dead, he was only a widower standing outside a child's bedroom, listening to the tiny broken breaths of the daughter he no longer knew how to reach. 3 years had passed since the accident, but the mansion still felt as if it had never moved beyond that night. The staff kept the halls polished, the silver bright, the curtains pressed, and the flowers fresh, yet nothing inside the house felt alive. Every room carried the memory of a woman who was gone. Every staircase seemed too wide. Every family portrait seemed too quiet. Salvatore's wife, Lucia, had once filled the mansion with music, candles, laughter, and the sweet smell of lemon cake cooling in the kitchen. After she died, the house became perfect, in the way a tomb is perfect. Clean, expensive, silent, untouched by warmth. And then there was Isabella. She was 6 years old, small for her age, with dark curls, solemn brown eyes, and a silver leg brace that clicked softly whenever she tried to walk. Before the accident, Isabella had been bright, loud, and fearless. She had run through the mansion with ribbons in her hair, hiding under dining tables, stealing olives from kitchen plates, and climbing into her father's lap, even when he was surrounded by men who carried guns under their jackets. She had spoken to everyone, to bodyguards, to cooks, to gardeners, to the marble angels in the fountain. She had once believed the world was a place that listened. Now she spoke in pieces. A word here, a whisper there. No. Tired. Hurts. Mama. The doctors told Salvatore her body was healing. They showed him scans, reports, therapy charts, movement assessments, and expensive plans printed on thick paper. They told him the brace supported her leg properly. They told him the pain was manageable. They told him children were resilient, that progress required discipline, that fear had to be pushed through. Salvatore paid every bill before it was asked for. He brought in the best specialists from New York, Boston, and Europe. He turned one wing of the mansion into a private medical suite with soft mats, bright mirrors, therapy bars, and machines that hummed gently in the corner. He gave orders. He approved treatments. He demanded results. But Isabella only grew quieter. The therapists would ask her to stand, and her hands would curl into fists. They would tell her to take one step, and her face would turn pale. They would praise her, encourage her, bargain with her, and sometimes lose patience in the soft, professional way adults do when they think kindness has been wasted. Isabella would stare past them, past the mirrors, past the bars, past the open door, as if she could see something none of them could. Then her little body would lock in place. Her breath would come too fast. Her eyes would fill, and she would reach for the nearest chair, as if the floor had become the road again, slick with rain, glass, headlights, and the terrible scream that had ended her mother's life. Salvatore did not know what to do with fear that small, so he worked. He left before breakfast. He returned after Isabella was asleep. He kissed her forehead when she did not wake. He stood in doorways and watched nurses change the blankets around her thin legs. He asked for updates from doctors instead of asking his daughter how she felt. Somewhere inside him, grief had turned into a locked room, and because he did not know how to open it without bleeding, he stayed outside it. He told himself he was protecting her. He told himself his work kept enemies away from the gates. He told himself a man like him was useful only when he was strong. But strength did not make Isabella speak. By the beginning of winter, the staff began leaving, not all at once, never in a way that looked dramatic. The first housekeeper resigned because of her nerves. The second said her husband was ill. A cook requested transfer to another Bellini property. A younger maid cried in the laundry room after hearing shouting from Salvatore's office and never came back after her day off. The mansion was too guarded, too tense, too full of men who lowered their voices when phones rang. Even the quiet felt dangerous. Working for Salvatore Bellini paid well, but money could not soften the feeling that one wrong step might place a person too close to a world they were never meant to see. That was how Emily Brooks came to Bellini House, on a gray Thursday afternoon, carrying one worn suitcase, wearing a plain navy dress under an old coat, and trying very hard not to look afraid. She was 28 years old, though worry had placed a tired softness around her eyes that made her seem older on hard days. She was plus size, with full cheeks, round arms, wide hips, and a body that had taught her early how quickly strangers believed they understood her before she ever spoke. People saw her size and assumed laziness. They saw her cheap shoes and assumed low standards. They saw her quiet manner and assumed there was nothing behind it. Emily had grown used to being underestimated, but she had never grown numb to it. Every careless glance still landed somewhere tender. Every polite little smile that looked past her still reminded her that the world often measured worth by the wrong things. The driver left her at the front steps beneath a sky the color of cold steel. Bellini House rose before her, like something from an old story rich people told to scare each other. It stood near Lake Michigan behind iron gates, black pines, security cameras, and stone walls tall enough to hide whatever grief lived inside. The mansion itself was beautiful, in a severe way, with pale limestone, tall windows, and a roofline sharp against the clouds. It did not welcome, it watched. A guard opened the door before Emily could knock. He was tall, broad, and expressionless, with a small earpiece tucked against his collar. His eyes moved over her suitcase, her coat, her face, and then down again, just long enough for Emily to feel the old familiar heat rise in her cheeks. He did not sneer. He did not need to. Some judgments were quiet enough to pass as manners. "Emily Brooks?" he asked. "Yes," she said, holding the strap of her bag tighter. "I'm here for the housekeeper position." He stepped aside. The air inside smelled faintly of lemon polish, old wood, and something floral that had been placed in the rooms but never lived there naturally. Emily followed him through a wide foyer, where marble floors reflected the light from a chandelier hanging above them like frozen rain. Men in dark suits moved in and out of side halls without speaking much. Somewhere far away, a phone rang once and stopped. The house seemed too large for the silence it carried. An older woman named Mrs. Vale met her near the main staircase. She was thin, sharp-eyed, and dressed in black, with keys hanging at her waist and a clipboard pressed to her chest like armor. She explained the rules quickly. Emily would live in a small room near the service hall. She would clean the east wing, assist with laundry, help in the kitchen when needed, and keep out of private family matters. She would not enter Mr. Bellini's office unless called. She would not speak to visitors. She would not ask questions about meetings, late-night arrivals, or security changes. She would not disturb Miss Isabella during medical sessions. Most importantly, she would remember that this was not an ordinary home. Emily listened and nodded. She needed this job. Her younger brother Noah was in school on a scholarship that covered almost everything except the things that still somehow cost too much. Books, transportation, lab fees, winter clothes, medicine for the breathing trouble that came and went when the weather changed. Their parents had died years earlier, and Emily had become sister, mother, bill payer, and safety net before she had learned how to build a life for herself. She had once wanted to study pediatric rehabilitation. She had once believed she might spend her days helping injured children learn to trust their bodies again. But dreams were easy to postpone when rent was due, and a teenage brother needed someone to stay. So Emily nodded at every rule, even the ones that made her stomach twist. Then she heard a sound from above. It was not loud, just a small scrape, followed by a faint metallic click. Emily looked up before she could stop herself. At the top of the staircase, half hidden behind the carved banister, stood a little girl in a pale blue sweater. Her dark curls fell loose around her face. One hand gripped the rail with desperate strength. Around one leg, a brace gleamed under the soft light. Her eyes were fixed on Emily with a guarded curiosity that felt much older than 6. Mrs. Vale followed Emily's gaze and immediately stiffened. "Miss Isabella," she called gently, though the gentleness sounded practiced. "You should be in your room." The child did not move. Emily did not smile too brightly. She did not wave. She did not speak in the loud, sweet voice adults often used around wounded children, as if softness required performance. She simply looked up and gave a small nod, the kind one person gives another when they meet in a hallway and do not want to make the moment too heavy. Isabella blinked. Then she turned carefully, her brace clicking once against the floor, and vanished into the upper hall. Mrs. Vale exhaled through her nose. "You will not involve yourself with the child unless instructed." "Of course," Emily said, but something inside her had already gone still and listening. That evening, Emily learned the rhythm of the mansion. Dinner was prepared with the care of a royal kitchen, though only a few plates were used. Salvatore Bellini did not come home to eat. Isabella's tray was carried upstairs, then returned mostly untouched. The men near the back entrance changed shifts at 8. The west wing remained locked. The conservatory doors near the garden were sealed, their brass handles dull from disuse. No one entered that room. No one even looked at it for long. Emily cleaned quietly. She folded sheets in the laundry room, wiped counters in the service kitchen, polished the long banister, and unpacked her suitcase in a narrow bedroom with one window facing the dark trees. It was not much, but the radiator worked, and the sheets smelled clean. She called Noah before bed and told him the house was fancy, the job was steady, and he needed to remember his inhaler. She did not tell him about the armed men at the gate. She did not tell him the mansion felt like it was holding its breath. She did not tell him about the little girl with the silent eyes. The next morning, Emily saw Isabella again. The child sat at the kitchen table, though it was clear she was not supposed to be there. A nurse stood nearby with a tight smile, trying to coax her into eating oatmeal from a porcelain bowl. Isabella's face was turned toward the window, watching lake fog move beyond the garden like a pale animal. Her small hands rested in her lap. The brace made one leg sit stiffly forward, and every now and then she shifted as if even sitting hurt. "Just 3 bites," the nurse said. "Then we practice." Isabella's shoulders rose toward her ears. Emily was at the sink rinsing berries. She did not look directly at the child, but she noticed everything. The way Isabella's fingers tightened at the word practice, the way her breath changed, the way her eyes moved toward the hallway, measuring the distance, already preparing to escape. The nurse sighed. "Isabella, you know what your father expects." At that, the child pushed the bowl away. Oatmeal spilled across the table. The nurse's lips pressed thin. That was not necessary. Emily dried her hands slowly and reached for a cloth. She moved with care, giving the child enough space, making no sudden motions. "Oatmeal does have a way of making dramatic exits," she said softly, mostly to the table. "Very rude of it." The nurse looked at her, annoyed. "Excuse me?" Emily wiped the spill. "Nothing. Just talking to breakfast." For the first time, Isabella's eyes shifted toward her. Emily kept her face calm. "When I was little, I spilled soup all over my uncle's shoes. He said the soup had chosen freedom. Personally, I respected it." A tiny change moved across Isabella's face. It was not a smile, not yet, but the hard line of fear around her mouth loosened. The nurse cleared her throat. "Miss Brooks, you may return to your duties." Emily nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She left the table cleaner than she found it, but as she walked away, she heard something behind her. A small breath. Almost nothing, but it sounded dangerously close to a laugh. For the next several days, Emily did only what she had been hired to do, at least where others could see. She cleaned Isabella's playroom when the child was away. She noticed untouched toys lined up perfectly on shelves, beautiful dolls still boxed, a miniature piano covered in dust, stacks of picture books no one seemed to read aloud. She found a basket of seashells near the window, their paint faded, their edges chipped. On the bottom of the basket was a small card in elegant handwriting. "For my Isabella, from Mama, so the sea will always know where to find you." Emily stood with that card in her hand for a long moment. Then she placed it back exactly where she found it. She began to understand the house in pieces. Lucia had loved the lake. Lucia had loved gardens and fairy tales and baking on rainy afternoons. Lucia had filled the conservatory with plants before it was locked. Lucia had been the bridge between Salvatore's dangerous world and Isabella's childhood. When she died, the bridge collapsed, and everyone left behind had simply stood on opposite sides of the empty space, not knowing how to cross. Emily also began to understand Isabella. The child did not hate walking. She feared being forced. She did not refuse therapy because she was stubborn. She froze because adults turned each step into a test, and every test carried the memory of the accident. They watched her too closely, counted too loudly, praised too quickly, corrected too soon. They made recovery feel like a performance, and Isabella had already lost too much under bright lights and adult panic. So Emily did something no one had asked her to do. She made the floor less frightening. It started with a ribbon. A pale yellow ribbon had come loose from a linen bundle in the laundry room. Emily carried it upstairs and, while cleaning the small sitting room near Isabella's bedroom, laid it gently along the carpet in a soft curve. She placed one painted seashell at the end, not too far, just a few steps from the child's favorite chair. When Isabella came in later, escorted by her nurse, She stopped at the doorway. Emily was dusting the shelf. "Oh," Emily said, as if surprised. "I wondered where that path went." The nurse frowned. "What path?" Emily tilted her head toward the ribbon. "That one. It showed up while I was cleaning. I think it might belong to someone from the sea." Isabella stared at the shell. The nurse gave Emily a warning look, but the child had already taken one careful step into the room. Emily went back to dusting, though every sense in her body sharpened. She did not watch directly. She did not hold out her hands. She did not say, "Good job." She let Isabella decide whether the shell was worth the journey. The brace clicked once, then again. The child reached the shell and bent with difficulty, gripping the arm of the chair to steady herself. Emily kept breathing slowly, as if the whole world did not feel suspended by a thread. Isabella picked up the shell. On the back, in tiny letters, Emily had written, "Secret One." The child looked at Emily. Emily only whispered, "That is a very serious shell." Isabella held it against her chest. After that, the mansion began to change in ways so small no one important noticed at first. A blue ribbon appeared near the library doorway. A green one curled across the nursery rug. A silver one led from Isabella's chair to the windows where the lake could be seen between the trees. Never made them hard. She hid shells, folded paper stars, tiny notes from imaginary birds, and once a little crown made of gold wrapping paper left over from the pantry shelves. Each treasure waited just far enough away that Isabella had to stand, reach, bend, or take a step without feeling hunted by expectation. When Isabella grew tired, Emily let the game end. When she stumbled, Emily did not gasp. When the little girl's face crumpled in frustration, Emily would sit on the floor, as if sitting there had been the plan all along. "Brave girls are allowed to rest," she would say gently. "Even queens sit down sometimes. Crowns are heavier than people think." At first Isabella answered with nods, then with whispers. "Again," she said one afternoon, so quietly Emily almost missed it. Emily's hands froze around a basket of folded towels, but she did not make the mistake of celebrating too loudly. She simply looked over and said, "Again sounds like a fine idea." The kitchen became their second kingdom. Emily had learned to bake out of necessity, because store-bought treats cost money she usually did not have. She knew how to make simple things feel magical. Sugar cookies, soft rolls, little apple pastries with cinnamon tucked inside. When Mrs. Vale allowed Isabella to sit in the kitchen for short periods, Emily began placing ingredients just beyond easy reach. The flour tin on one side of the table, the spoon near the counter, the bowl by the chair. Nothing obvious. Nothing cruel. Just small invitations. "Can you pass me the cinnamon?" Emily asked one morning. Isabella looked at the jar. It sat 3 steps away. The nurse started to move. Emily gently said, "No rush. Cinnamon is patient." Isabella stood slowly. Her face tightened. Her hands trembled. The brace clicked. 1 step. A pause. Another step. A breath. 1 more. She grabbed the cinnamon and held it out like a warrior returning from battle. Emily accepted it with solemn respect. "You may have saved the entire recipe." A sound slipped out of Isabella then, light and sudden. A laugh. It was small, but it moved through the kitchen like sunlight entering a room that had forgotten morning existed. No one told Salvatore, not because Emily wanted to hide anything from him, but because she sensed that Isabella's courage was still too tender to be placed under the weight of reports. The mansion already had enough men carrying messages, numbers, threats and orders. This was not business. This was a child slowly finding her way back to herself. Some things had to grow in quiet before they could survive being seen. But secrets inside Salvatore Bellini's house never stayed hidden for long. One night, close to midnight, Salvatore returned earlier than expected. The meeting had gone badly. A rival family from Cicero had tested his patience, speaking too boldly about territory that did not belong to them. Salvatore had ended the conversation without raising his voice, which was how his men knew the danger had become serious. He stepped out of his black car with his coat open, his jaw tight, and a storm behind his eyes. The guards at the entrance straightened. No one spoke unless spoken to. He entered the mansion expecting silence. Instead, he heard laughter. For one terrible second, he thought grief had finally turned against him. The sound was too light, too strange, too impossible in that house. It floated down the hall from the old conservatory, the room no one had opened since Lucia's death. Salvatore stopped so suddenly his closest guard nearly walked into him. Again, the laugh came. A child's laugh. Isabella's laugh. Salvatore lifted one hand, ordering his men to stay back. Then he moved alone down the dark hall, past portraits, past locked cabinets, past the cold trail of memories he had spent 3 years avoiding. The conservatory doors stood slightly open. Warm light spilled through the crack onto the floor. He looked inside. The room was alive. Someone had uncovered the old glass ceiling. Moonlight and lamplight mingled over sleeping plants. Emily must have cleaned and watered back into color. A few blankets were spread on the floor. Paper stars hung from strings, tied between empty plant stands. Ribbons crossed the tiles in gentle lines, and in the middle of it all, Emily Brooks knelt with a paper crown in her hands. Isabella stood several feet away, alone. No nurse held her, no doctor counted, no therapist urged her forward. Her brace caught the light. Her small hands shook at her sides. Her face was pale with effort, but she was not crying. Emily held the crown out, smiling as if nothing in the world mattered except the game between them. "The princess has reached the final bridge," Emily said softly, "but the crown cannot move." "Crowns are very stubborn." Isabella took a tiny step. Salvatore forgot how to breathe. His daughter swayed. Emily did not rush toward her. She stayed where she was, steady as a lighthouse. "That's it," Emily whispered. "No hurry. The bridge will wait." Isabella took another step, then another. The brace clicked against the tile, each sound striking Salvatore somewhere deeper than fear. His hand closed around the doorframe. He had watched men beg for mercy without blinking. He had sat through gunfire with a calm face. He had buried the woman he loved and still stood straight while others watched him for weakness. But seeing his little girl take 3 trembling steps toward a paper crown nearly brought him to his knees. Isabella reached Emily and fell forward into her arms. Emily caught her easily, wrapping her in warmth without making the fall feel like failure. Isabella laughed into Emily's shoulder, breathless and bright, and Emily laughed with her, rocking gently on the floor of the room Salvatore had been too broken to enter. "You crossed the bridge," Emily whispered. Isabella lifted her face. "I did it." The words were clear, small, real. Salvatore stepped back from the doorway before they could see him. His chest felt too tight. The hall seemed changed around him, as if the mansion had shifted while he was away, and he had returned to find a door open inside his own life. For the first time in 3 years, Salvatore Bellini did not go to his office. He stood in the darkness outside the conservatory, listening to his daughter laugh, and understood with a slow, painful wonder that the woman he had hired to clean his house had begun cleaning the sorrow from it instead. Salvatore Bellini stayed outside the conservatory long after the laughter faded into soft whispers. He stood with one hand still pressed to the wall, as if the stone itself was the only thing keeping him steady. Inside the room, Emily was helping Isabella settle onto a blanket, speaking to her in a quiet voice about brave princesses, sleepy bridges, and crowns that needed rest after difficult journeys. It should have sounded silly to a man like Salvatore, a man who had built his life on fear, silence, and obedience, but instead it struck him with a strange and painful tenderness. He had spent 3 years paying people to heal his daughter, and a poor housekeeper with kind eyes and worn shoes had reached Isabella by pretending a paper crown was worth crossing the world for. He left before they noticed him, not because he was angry, not because he wanted to punish anyone. He left because he did not trust himself to speak. His office waited at the end of the hall, dark and cold, with ledgers on the desk and unread messages flashing on a secure phone. Normally that room was where he returned to himself. The heavy desk, the locked cabinets, the clean smell of leather and smoke, all of it reminded him who he was. Salvatore Bellini, the man people feared, the man who never shook. But that night, the office felt smaller than ever. He sat in the chair behind his desk and stared at nothing. His daughter had laughed. His daughter had walked. His daughter had spoken full words without fear in a room he had not been brave enough to enter. By morning, the house sensed a change before anyone understood it. Salvatore did not leave before breakfast. His car waited by the front steps, engine running, but he did not come down wearing his usual black coat with his usual unreadable face. Instead, he stood at the entrance to the breakfast room, watching Isabella sit at the table while Emily cut strawberries into small stars with a kitchen knife. The child was speaking softly, not much, but more than Salvatore had heard in months. She was telling Emily that the red berries looked like treasure stolen from a dragon. Emily nodded seriously and said dragons were known for poor fruit security. A sound escaped Salvatore before he could stop it. Not a laugh, something close to one. Isabella turned toward him so quickly her spoon tapped the bowl. Fear moved across her face first, because fear had become her first language. Then uncertainty. Then the shy, careful look of a child trying to remember how her father fit into the room. Salvatore stepped forward slowly. Every guard outside the door seemed to hold his breath. "Good morning, Isabella," he said. She looked down at her bowl. Morning. One word. Only one, but it landed in his chest like a blessing. Emily lowered her eyes and began wiping a clean counter that did not need wiping. She could feel him watching her. She expected anger, questions, maybe dismissal. Men like Salvatore did not usually enjoy discovering that rules had been bent inside their own homes. But he said nothing about the conservatory, nothing about ribbons, nothing about hidden seashells or secret bridges. He only pulled out the chair across from Isabella and sat down as if he had not forgotten how to be a father for 3 years. The room became almost painfully quiet. Emily turned toward the stove, giving them privacy while staying close enough in case Isabella needed comfort. Salvatore saw that too. He saw how Emily made room without leaving, how she protected without taking over, how she understood the exact distance between help and control. "Are those strawberries good?" he asked. Isabella glanced at Emily, then back at him. "Dragon treasure." Salvatore looked at the plate, then at his daughter. His voice lowered with grave respect. "Then we should be careful." For the first time in years, Isabella smiled at her father. It was small, quick, and almost afraid of itself. But he saw it. He saw it. And something inside him broke open so quietly, no one else heard. From that morning on, Salvatore began coming home earlier. At first, the change was small enough that his men could pretend not to notice. A meeting cut short by 15 minutes. A phone call taken from the garden instead of the downtown office. A late dinner refused because he had to be back before Isabella slept. But powerful men notice shifts in powerful men. And soon, every person in Salvatore's world understood that something inside Bellini House had become more important than business. No one knew what to make of Emily Brooks. To the staff, she remained polite, quiet, and hard-working. She scrubbed sinks, folded linens, arranged flowers, and carried laundry baskets against her hip. She never acted as if she had gained special standing. She never used Salvatore's attention like a shield. But the house had begun to lean toward her. Isabella searched for her in every room. The kitchen warmed when she entered it. Even the guards softened their voices when she passed, as if her calm had become a rule of its own. Salvatore watched her more than he meant to. He watched from the terrace as she guided Isabella through the winter garden, where ribbons were tied between low branches, like secret trails left by fairies. He watched from the library as Emily sat on the rug and let Isabella explain an entire kingdom made of shells, spoons, paper stars, and sugar cubes. He watched in the kitchen as Emily placed a bowl just far enough away for Isabella to stand, reach, and sit again with pride glowing in her face. Emily never hurried her, never corrected her in front of others, never spoke of weakness. She treated fear like a visitor that could be invited to sit down, not like an enemy that had to be beaten out of the room. And slowly, Isabella changed. Her steps became steadier. Her voice began returning in pieces, then sentences. She asked for warm milk. She asked where the moon went during storms. She asked if mermaids could have birthdays. One afternoon, while rain tapped against the kitchen windows, she looked up from rolling dough with Emily and whispered, "I want to try again." Salvatore was standing just outside the kitchen door. He closed his eyes. Those 5 words hurt more than any threat ever made against him, because they showed him the truth. His daughter had wanted to try before. She had simply been too afraid to try, in a house that treated every step like proof, every stumble like failure, and every silence like a problem to solve. Emily had not forced courage into Isabella. She had made a safe place where courage could come out on its own. That evening, Salvatore called Emily into his office. She came with flour still dusting one sleeve of her dress and worry shadowing her face. The room made her nervous. It made everyone nervous. The walls were dark wood. The curtains were heavy. A portrait of Salvatore's father hung above a locked cabinet, staring down with cold eyes. Emily stood near the door, hands folded, ready to be corrected. Salvatore looked at her for a long moment. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked. Emily's fingers tightened. "About Isabella? Yes? I thought you knew some of it. I knew reports. I knew numbers. I knew what doctors wrote down." His voice softened, though it remained rough around the edges. "I did not know my daughter was laughing in the conservatory." Emily looked down. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line." "You crossed many lines." Her face paled. Salvatore stood and walked around the desk, but he did not come too close. "And somehow, every one of them led my daughter back to me." Emily's eyes lifted slowly. He wanted to say thank you. He wanted to say he had been blind. He wanted to say that the sight of Isabella walking toward that crown had shaken him more deeply than blood, war, or death. But Salvatore was still learning how to speak without hiding behind command. "Why did you keep it quiet?" he asked. Emily took a careful breath. "Because some victories should not be handed to people as news. They should be witnessed, especially by the people who need them most." The answer settled into the room with more power than any threat. In Salvatore's world, people reported everything, because information meant leverage. Men brought him secrets to earn favor. Lawyers brought him papers to earn money. Politicians brought him promises to earn protection. Emily had given him nothing to gain credit. She had simply done the work, quietly, day after day, because a child needed her. "You have done this before," he said. Emily gave a small, sad smile. "A little. Years ago, I worked at a children's recovery clinic, mostly as an assistant. I cleaned equipment, helped with games, read stories, watched therapists. I wanted to study it properly. Why didn't you?" Her smile faded. "Life became expensive." He waited. "My parents died when my brother was younger, Noah. He needed me. So school had to wait. Then bills came, and waiting turned into years." She glanced toward the window, where the lake was dark under the evening sky. "It happens. People give up dreams every day. Mine wasn't special." Salvatore stared at her, feeling something sharp move through him. She said it with no bitterness, and somehow that made it worse. He thought of the money locked in accounts under names that did not exist. Properties sitting empty, because they were useful on paper. Cars he forgot he owned. Men who wasted fortunes trying to impress him. And here stood Emily Brooks, wearing a plain dress with flower on the sleeve, speaking about a lost dream, as if it were a cup she had dropped and cleaned up long ago. "It was special," he said. Emily looked at him, startled. Before she could answer, a knock came at the door. One of his men opened it just enough to say a meeting was waiting downstairs. Men from Cicero, men who would not like being kept waiting. Salvatore did not take his eyes off Emily. "Let them wait," he said. The guard disappeared. Emily swallowed. "Mr. Bellini, I don't want to cause trouble." "You haven't caused trouble, Emily." His voice dropped lower, softer. "You have caused light." After that, Salvatore no longer pretended Emily was only his housekeeper. He still did not know what to call the change between them, and neither did she. He did not touch her without care. He did not speak to her with the easy possession men in his world often mistook for affection. Something about Emily demanded a different kind of courage from him. With others, Salvatore could take, command, buy, or threaten. With Emily, he had to ask. He had to wait. He had to become gentle without making a performance of it. It frightened him more than his enemies did. Winter thinned slowly over Chicago. Snow gathered on the edges of the garden paths, then melted into dark earth. The lake changed color with every storm. Inside the mansion, Isabella's laughter became less surprising. She walked farther now, still wearing her brace, still sometimes tired, still sometimes afraid, but no longer trapped inside the fear. Salvatore learned the rules of her games. Badly at first. He gave the wrong voices to stuffed animals. He forgot that the blue shells belonged to the Moon Kingdom, and the pink ones belonged to the Lake Queen. He once called a paper dragon a lizard, and was corrected with such seriousness that Emily had to turn away to hide her smile. But Isabella began reaching for his hand again. That alone would have been enough to make him believe in miracles. Then came the memorial. Every year, on the anniversary of Lucia's death, Salvatore held a ceremony in the main hall. It was not warm. It was not healing. It was tradition wrapped in black clothing and expensive flowers. Relatives came because they were expected. Business allies came because grief near power was still power. Men stood beneath the chandeliers and spoke softly about respect, loyalty, and memory. A portrait of Lucia was placed at the end of the marble hall, surrounded by white roses. Salvatore would carry Isabella to the portrait, let her place flowers in silence, then hand her back to a nurse before the child became overwhelmed. That year, Emily dressed Isabella in a soft cream dress, with tiny pearl buttons and a ribbon in her dark curls. The brace remained on her leg, visible and shining. Emily did not try to hide it. Isabella looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. "Do I look okay?" she whispered. Emily knelt behind her. "You look like a girl who has crossed many bridges." Isabella touched the ribbon in her hair. "Will Papa carry me?" "If you want him to." The child was quiet. Then she said, "I want to walk." Emily felt her throat tighten, but she kept her face calm. "Then we will make sure the floor knows to behave." The hall was full when Isabella appeared at the top of the short side entrance near the family rooms. Conversation died slowly, then all at once. Salvatore stood near Lucia's portrait in a black suit, a white rose pinned to his lapel. He saw his daughter holding a small bouquet in both hands. He saw Emily behind her, close enough to catch her if she fell, far enough not to steal the choice. A relative stepped forward as if to help. Salvatore raised one hand. The man stopped. Isabella looked very small at the beginning of that long marble path. The hall stretched before her, shining and cold. Dozens of eyes watched. Men who had faced bullets without flinching now looked uneasy, as if they knew they were witnessing something too honest for the world they lived in. Isabella took one step. The brace clicked. She took another. Her fingers tightened around the flowers. Her face trembled with effort, but she did not stop. Salvatore lowered himself slowly to one knee at the far end of the hall. He did not call out. He did not command. He simply waited with tears already burning in his eyes. Halfway across, Isabella stumbled. A sound moved through the crowd. Emily stepped forward one pace, then stopped when Isabella lifted her hand slightly. "Not yet." The child breathed in, shoulders shaking, and found her balance again. Salvatore pressed his fist against his mouth. Isabella kept walking. When she reached the portrait, the hall was so silent, the soft rustle of the flowers sounded loud. Lucia's painted face smiled down in stillness. Isabella placed the bouquet below the frame. Then she looked up, her lips trembling. "I miss you, Mama," she said clearly. Salvatore broke. He did not turn away. He did not hide behind anger. He did not become stone because men were watching. Tears ran down his face in front of his family, his guards, his allies, and his enemies, dressed as friends. Isabella turned from the portrait and looked at him, and Salvatore opened his arms. This time, when she moved into them, he did not lift her to carry her away from the moment. He held her while she stood on her own feet. Emily remained a few steps behind them, her own eyes bright. Salvatore looked at her over Isabella's shoulder, and in that crowded hall, with Lucia's portrait above them, and the house full of people who finally understood that something sacred had happened there, he knew his life had split into before and after. Before Emily, he had confused control with love. After Emily, he understood love was sometimes standing close enough to catch someone, but trusting them to take the step alone. Later that night, after the guests had left, and Isabella had fallen asleep with one hand tucked under her cheek, Salvatore found Emily in the conservatory. She was taking down the paper stars from the strings, moving quietly in the warm lamplight. The room smelled of damp soil, clean leaves, and faint sugar from pastries baked earlier that day. "You don't have to clean tonight," he said from the doorway. Emily turned. "I know. I just needed something to do." He stepped inside. "So did I. For 3 years." She looked at him with gentle sadness, and somehow that was the thing that undid him most. Not pity. Never pity. Just understanding. Salvatore walked to the old bench near the windows and sat. "If fear and money did not decide your life, what would you do?" Emily gave a soft laugh, but it faded quickly when she saw he meant the question. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." She looked down at the paper star in her hand. "I would finish school. I would work with children like Isabella. Not only children with injuries, but children who have been through things their bodies remember, even when adults want them to hurry up and be fine." Her voice grew quieter. "I would open a place where families who don't have money could bring them. A place that didn't feel like a hospital. A place with gardens, warm kitchens, therapy rooms, quiet corners, maybe music. Somewhere children could recover without feeling broken." Salvatore listened without moving. Emily shook her head, as if waking from a dream she had no right to keep. "It's too much. Places like that need money, permits, staff, insurance, everything." It was just an old idea. "No," Salvatore said. "It is a future." She looked at him. He stood, crossing the room slowly. "I have a property on the south side. It used to be a private school. Empty now. Good bones. Large garden. Strong walls. Mr. Bellini." "Salvatore," he said softly. Her breath caught. He stopped in front of her. "Finish your studies. Hire the people you trust. Build the place you just described. I will fund it." Emily stared at him as if he had spoken in a language she could not understand. "I can't accept that." "You can. That is too much." "No," he said, his voice thick with feeling he no longer wanted to hide. "Too much is a child being afraid to walk because adults are too impatient to understand her pain. Too much is a woman giving up her calling because the world made survival so expensive. This is not too much. This is what should have happened long ago." Tears slipped down Emily's cheeks. "Why would you do that for me?" Salvatore lifted his hand, then paused, waiting. When she did not move away, he gently brushed one tear from her cheek. "Because you gave my daughter back her life, and because somewhere along the way, you gave me back mine." The year that followed did not turn Salvatore Bellini into a harmless man. The city did not suddenly become clean because love had entered his house. Enemies still whispered, deals still moved in shadows, men still feared his name. But the center of his world changed. He no longer mistook distance for protection. He ate breakfast at home more often than not. He learned the names of Isabella's dolls, though he still confused the Sea Kingdom politics. He kept fewer meetings after dark, and when violence reached for his gates, he pushed it back harder than ever, because now he understood exactly what peace inside those walls was worth. Emily studied at night, worked with specialists by day, and slowly stepped out of the small life she had accepted as all she was allowed to have. Salvatore never rushed her. He never turned her dream into one more thing he owned. He gave resources, protection, and space. Emily gave the vision its heart. She chose paint colors that felt warm. She interviewed therapists who knew how to listen. She insisted on a kitchen where children could bake, a garden with smooth paths, therapy rooms with soft light, and shelves filled with books, shells, ribbons, blocks, paints, and strange little treasures that could turn hard work into wonder. 1 year after the night Salvatore found laughter in the conservatory, the Bellini Children's Healing Center opened its doors. The building stood under a bright spring sky, its old brick washed clean, its windows shining, its garden newly planted with lavender, roses, and young trees. Families gathered near the entrance. Some children wore braces, some held canes, some sat in wheelchairs, some carried fears no one could see. Emily stood near the front doors in a soft green dress, her hands trembling slightly as she looked at the crowd. She was still plus size, still gentle, still humble in the way people are when life has asked them to carry too much. But she no longer looked like a woman trying to disappear. She looked steady, needed, loved. Salvatore stepped beside her with Isabella holding his hand. Isabella was 7 now. She still wore her brace sometimes, but she walked with a confidence that made strangers smile without knowing why. Her curls bounced around her face, her voice was clear, her laughter came easily. She looked at the building with wide eyes, then at Emily. "Is this for kids like me?" she asked. Emily knelt carefully. "Yes, sweetheart. Kids exactly like you." Isabella thought about that. "Then they need shells." Emily laughed softly. "There are many shells." "And ribbons?" "Many ribbons. And snacks," Salvatore answered with great seriousness. "Your father has personally approved the snacks." Isabella nodded, satisfied. When it was time to speak, Salvatore stood before the crowd. Cameras flashed, though no reporter dared ask careless questions. Men who once knew him only as a name spoken with fear watched him place one hand on Isabella's shoulder and the other lightly at Emily's back. "I thought I hired someone to care for a house," he said, his deep voice carrying across the garden. But Emily Brooks did something far greater. She cared for the life inside it. She taught my daughter that healing is not a race. She taught me that power means nothing if it cannot protect tenderness. This center exists because she believed that children deserve patience before pity, safety before pressure, and hope before anyone asks them to be brave. Emily lowered her face, overwhelmed. Isabella tugged at her hand. Emily looked down. The little girl stepped closer, in front of everyone, and wrapped her arms around Emily's waist. Her cheek pressed into the soft green fabric of Emily's dress. "I love you, Mama Emily," Isabella said. The world seemed to stop. Emily covered her mouth as a sob broke through her. Salvatore stood motionless for one breath, then another, his own eyes shining. He looked at his daughter, then at the woman who had entered his home with one suitcase and somehow filled its emptiest rooms with life. Emily knelt and gathered Isabella into her arms. "I love you too," she whispered. Salvatore joined them, one arm around his daughter, the other around Emily, holding them both with the quiet strength of a man who finally understood that not every precious thing could be guarded with walls. Some had to be held with open hands. Around them, the crowd began to clap, but the sound felt far away. For Salvatore, there was only Isabella's laughter, Emily's tears, and the open doors of a place built from sorrow, but no longer ruled by it. Together, the three of them walked into the healing center. The halls were warm. The garden doors were open. Somewhere inside, sunlight fell across a basket of painted shells waiting for small hands to find them. And for the first time in many years, The Bellini name did not feel like a warning whispered in fear. It felt like a promise that even in a city full of shadows, miracles could still grow quietly. Not all at once, not with thunder or grand magic, but with patience, with love, with one safe hand nearby, and with one brave step at a time.
A dying girl rolled into the ambulance bay with snow in her hair, poison in her blood, and two armed men begging for a miracle they did not deserve. At St. Aurelia's, miracles were supposed to come from men in white coats with polished names and silver watches. But on that frozen night by the New York waterfront, the only person brave enough to reach into the dark and pull death back by the throat was a plus-size trauma nurse everyone had spent years pretending not to see. Maribel Voss moved through the midnight shift like she had been born under hospital lights. Most people called her Mara, but only the patients said it with warmth. To the doctors, she was Voss, the nurse with the wide hips and quiet face, who always seemed to know too much. To the younger nurses at the station, she was the woman who wore compression shoes, kept snacks in her locker, and somehow never broke down, even when the night turned ugly. To Celeste Warden, the smooth, beautiful executive director of St. Aurelia's, Mara was a problem hidden in navy scrubs. Too soft around the edges, too plain, too big for the clean glass image Celeste liked to sell to donors who walked through the old private hospital with their pearls, their winter coats, and their quiet fear of anything real. St. Aurelia's had been built almost a century ago, back when rich families wanted their pain handled behind marble walls. The hospital sat near the water, its tall windows facing the dark river, its stone body always damp from fog and salt wind. At night, it looked less like a place of healing and more like a mansion that had learned too many secrets. Pipes groaned behind the walls, elevators sighed between floors. The old chapel on the east wing smelled faintly of candle wax, even though no one had lit a candle there in years. Mara knew every sound. She knew which doors stuck in the cold, which monitors lied when their wires were loose, and which doctors smiled for donors but vanished when uninsured patients came bleeding through the emergency doors. She had been on her feet for 11 hours when the night began to turn. Her lower back ached. Her curls had escaped the knot at the back of her head. A coffee she had forgotten to drink sat cold near the medication cart. Still, her hands were steady as she changed a dressing for an elderly man with a fever and whispered softly to a frightened little boy who had cut his palm open on broken glass. Mara had a way of making pain feel less lonely. It was not dramatic. She did not give speeches. She just stayed. She stayed when people cried. She stayed when doctors rushed out. She stayed when families asked the same question again and again because fear made them forget the answer. That was the part of her no one at St. Aurelia's seemed to value. They saw her body before they saw her skill. They saw the roundness of her face before they saw the speed of her mind. Dr. Edwin Calloway, the senior attending on duty that night, often spoke to her as if she were furniture with a nursing license. He was tall, silver-haired, and famous among the board for his calm voice and expensive manners. He had once told Mara, in front of 2 interns, that she had a comforting shape, the kind nervous patients liked, as though her body was a padded chair and not something she lived inside every day. Mara had smiled then because she needed the job. She smiled often at St. Aurelia's. She smiled the way women smile when they are trying not to lose the one thing keeping their whole life standing. Her father's latest bill was folded inside her locker behind a spare pair of socks. She had read it 3 times during her break, even though the numbers never changed. Another overdue notice. Another polite threat from a billing office that did not care how carefully she stretched each paycheck. Her father, Jonah Voss, had once been a dock electrician with strong hands and a laugh that filled their small apartment. Then came the accident, the spinal injury, the long surgeries, the chair, the pain medication, and the quiet way pride drained out of a man when he had to ask his daughter to help him from bed. Mara worked every shift she could get. She swallowed every insult. She kept going because love did not care if she was tired. Just after 2 in the morning, Celeste Warden appeared in the emergency department, wearing a cream coat and heels too sharp for hospital floors. She had come down from a donor dinner upstairs, her blonde hair smooth, her lipstick untouched, her smile as cold as the windows. The charity event had been held in the grand ballroom wing, where wealthy families drank champagne beneath old chandeliers and spoke about compassion, while security made sure no one without an invitation wandered too close. "Mara," Celeste said, stopping near the nurse's station, her eyes moving over Mara's body with careful disappointment. "Please remember we have guests still in the building. Keep the front area tidy." Mara looked down at the stack of bloody gauze she had just sealed into a biohazard bag, then back at Celeste. "We had 3 traumas come in within 20 minutes. Celeste's smile did not change, and yet presentation still matters. Dr. Calloway, standing nearby with his tablet, gave a small amused breath through his nose. One of the newer nurses lowered her eyes, pretending not to hear. Mara felt the old heat rise beneath her skin, but she said nothing. She had learned that some people did not want to reply. They wanted proof they could step on you and keep walking. Then the ambulance bay doors exploded open. The sound was not like a normal arrival. It was a metal scream, followed by the violent crunch of tires sliding over ice. Every head turned as a black SUV lurched into the bay at an angle, its front bumper smashed, steam pouring from beneath the hood. For one strange second, no one moved. Snow blew in through the open doors. The red lights above the bay washed the vehicle in a pulsing glow, making it look wounded and alive. 2 men jumped out. They were not paramedics. They were broad, dark-coated, and armed, with the kind of faces people remembered only in nightmares. One of them yanked open the back door. The other shouted for help, his voice cracking with panic. Between them, they dragged out a young woman in a silver evening dress, her body limp, her dark hair falling across her pale face. She could not have been more than 22. Her lips had a faint blue tint. Her fingers twitched once, then went still. The emergency room froze around her. Mara did not. She was already moving before anyone gave permission. Her shoes hit the wet floor hard as she rushed forward, grabbing a gurney and snapping orders in a voice that cut through the panic. "Get her flat. Head turned. I need oxygen. Cardiac monitor. 2 large-bore IVs. Now." One of the armed men stared at her, as if he did not expect someone like her to take charge. Mara stared back. "Move, or she dies on your shoes." That worked. He moved. The young woman hit the gurney with a soft, terrible weight. Mara's fingers found her pulse. Thin, uneven, slipping. She peeled one eyelid open and saw the pupil reaction, then leaned close enough to smell bitter almonds beneath perfume and champagne. Not cyanide, something cleaner, something expensive. Her gaze moved to the tiny red mark near the girl's collarbone, half hidden by the strap of her dress. Injection site. The girl's breathing hitched, then weakened into a shallow flutter. "What happened?" Mara demanded. The younger armed man swallowed. "She collapsed at the Warden Gala. She was fine, then she couldn't breathe. We were told this hospital was closest." Celeste's face went white at the mention of the gala. Dr. Calloway stepped forward at last, but not toward the patient. His eyes were on the men's coats, their weapons, the blood smeared on one cuff. "Everyone stop," he said sharply. "Do not touch her further." Mara looked at him, as if he had spoken in a language she did not understand. "She is crashing." "I said stop." Calloway's voice hardened. "These men are armed. We do not know who she is or what happened. Security will call the police. We wait for clearance." The monitor began to beep as the young woman's heart rhythm faltered. Mara's stomach turned cold. She does not have time for clearance. Calloway stepped closer, lowering his voice with a warning meant only for her. "You are a nurse. You do not make that decision." "No," Mara said, already reaching for the oxygen mask. "Her body is making it." The room seemed to narrow around her. She could feel every pair of eyes on her back. Celeste's anger, Calloway's pride. The younger nurses waiting to see if the big woman in tired scrubs would finally learn her place. But Mara was not thinking about them anymore. She was thinking about the poison, a rare neuromuscular toxin, fast-acting, usually hidden in tiny doses, and almost impossible to detect before it reached the heart. She had seen it once in a medical journal after a diplomat died in London. Most people would miss it. Most doctors would call it an allergic reaction, until the patient was already gone. "Sophia," one of the men said suddenly, his voice breaking. "Her name is Sophia, please." The name touched something human in the room, but not enough to save her. Mara pulled the mask over Sophia's face and watched her chest barely rise. "Get me the emergency antidote kit from the restricted cabinet." No one moved. Dr. Calloway's face twisted with disbelief. "Absolutely not." Mara turned slowly. For years, she had made herself calm for other people. Calm when patients screamed. Calm when doctors blamed her for their own mistakes. Calm when Celeste looked at her like she was a stain on polished marble. But now, something old and bright rose in her chest, something that had been waiting under every swallowed insult. "She will be dead in 3 minutes," Mara said. "If you open that cabinet without authorization, I will have your license." Mara looked down at Sophia, at the blue around her mouth, at the weak tremble of a girl trying to stay alive in a room full of people afraid of paperwork. Then Mara walked to the restricted cabinet. The sound of the lock alarm was sharp and ugly when she forced it open with the emergency override key. Someone gasped. Celeste said her name like a threat. Calloway cursed under his breath. Mara ignored all of it. Her hands moved fast, pulling the antidote vial, checking the concentration, calculating the dose by weight and symptom onset. Her mind became clear in the way it always did when death came close. No gossip, no shame, no bills, no body she had been taught to hide. Only the patient, only the math, only the breath she had to bring back. Sophia's heart rhythm broke. The monitor screamed. Mara injected the antidote into the IV line and pushed the dose steady, her fingers firm around the syringe. "Come on," she whispered, leaning over the young woman. "Stay with me." For a few seconds, nothing happened. The room held its breath. Sophia's body arched once. Her chest stopped moving. The younger armed man made a broken sound. Calloway stepped forward, already ready to declare the failure as Mara's fault. But Mara pressed 2 fingers beneath Sophia's jaw and waited, because she knew medicine sometimes arrived like dawn, slow at first, then all at once. One beat touched her fingertips, then another. Sophia dragged in a thin, ragged breath beneath the oxygen mask. The monitor steadied. A quiet shock moved through the emergency room. It was not applause. It was not praise. It was the silence of people who had just watched the person they dismissed do the impossible. Mara closed her eyes for one brief second, her hand still resting near Sophia's pulse. "There you are," she whispered. By sunrise, the girl was alive in the intensive care unit, and Mara was standing in a glass office with wet shoes, aching feet, and security waiting outside the door. Celeste sat behind her desk, as if the night had personally offended her. Dr. Calloway stood near the window, arms folded, his face arranged into noble disappointment. Neither of them mentioned Sophia's pulse. Neither of them mentioned the breath that had returned because Mara had acted when everyone else stood still. "You broke protocol," Celeste said. "I saved a patient. You stole restricted medication. I used emergency medication during an emergency. You brought armed criminals into this hospital's care environment." Mara stared at her. "They brought a dying woman." Calloway's mouth tightened. "You acted outside your authority and placed the hospital in legal danger." Mara almost laughed, but the sound would have come out too tired. Legal danger, reputation, donor trust. The words floated around the room like perfume sprayed over rot. Sophia had nearly died on their floor, and all they could see was the mess her survival made. Celeste folded her hands. "Effective immediately. Your employment at St. Aurelia's is terminated. We will also be reviewing whether your actions should be reported to the state board." The words landed with dull force. Mara thought of her father's bill, the rent, the medication, the little jar of coins on the kitchen counter. For a moment, the room tilted, and she had to hold her hands together so they would not shake. "I did my job," she said quietly. "No," Celeste replied, her voice soft and clean and cruel. "You forgot your place." An hour later, Mara walked out through the employee entrance with her belongings stuffed into a paper bag that had already torn along one side. A spare scrub top hung out of the gap. Her phone was dead, Her coat was too thin for the wind coming off the water. Snow fell in small, hard flakes that stung her cheeks as she stepped onto the empty street behind the hospital. The city before dawn felt abandoned. The waterfront warehouses stood dark and silent. Ice crusted along the curb. Somewhere behind her, St. Aurelia's glowed warm and golden, pretending to be holy. Mara walked with her head down, one hand gripping the broken bag, the other tucked under her arm for warmth. She did not cry at first. She was too tired. Then she thought of her father waking up and asking how her shift went. She thought of telling him she had lost the job. She thought of the way he would blame himself, because sick people always seem to believe love was a debt. Her throat tightened. The first black car appeared behind her when she passed beneath the abandoned railway bridge. Then another. Then a third. Their headlights spread across the snow, long and pale, trapping her shadow under her feet. Mara stopped walking. Her breath came out in white clouds. Doors opened one by one, and men stepped into the cold. Dark coats, watchful eyes, hands hidden near their waists. Mara's fingers tightened around the paper bag until it ripped wider. From the lead car, a man emerged with no hurry at all. He was tall, dressed in a black wool coat that looked untouched by the storm. His dark hair was brushed back from a face too calm to be kind and too beautiful to be safe. The men around him did not speak. They did not need to. The air itself seemed to make room for him. Mara knew who he was before he said a word. Matteo De Luca. The name moved through New York in whispers, in police reports, in locked rooms, and in the eyes of men who suddenly remembered other places they needed to be. He was the kind of man hospitals feared receiving and politicians feared refusing. The most dangerous crime boss on the East Coast was standing in front of Mara beneath a dead railway bridge while snow gathered on his shoulders. She lifted her chin, even though her body wanted to run. "If you came to scare me," Mara said, her voice rough from exhaustion, "you are late." Something changed in his eyes. Not amusement, not anger. Interest, sharp and quiet. "I came," Matteo said, his voice low and steady, "to find the woman who saved Sophia." Mara swallowed. She has a name. The silence that followed was deep enough to hear the river moving in the dark. Then Matteo stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching something wounded that might still bite. His gaze moved over her soaked shoes, her cheap coat, the torn paper bag, the hospital badge still clipped to her pocket with the word "terminated" written in red across the temporary access slip. When his eyes returned to her face, the cold in them had changed shape. "What is your name?" he asked. "Mara Voss." Matteo repeated it once, softly, like he was making sure the night itself remembered. Then he looked past her, toward the glowing hospital on the hill, and his expression became something frighteningly still. "They fired you," he said. Mara let out a tired breath, for saving her. The men behind him shifted, but Matteo did not. He stared at St. Aurelia's, as if the old hospital had just signed its own confession. "Sophia is my goddaughter," he said. "Her father died in my arms 10 years ago. I promised him she would be protected. Tonight, everyone paid to protect her froze. You did not." Mara wanted to answer, but her throat closed around the words. The cold was sinking through her clothes now. Her fingers had gone numb. She was too proud to shiver, and too human to stop. Matteo saw it anyway. His jaw tightened. He removed his black coat and placed it around her shoulders before she could step back. It was heavy, warm, and carried the faint scent of cedar, smoke, and winter air. Mara looked up at him, startled by the gentleness of the motion. "I don't belong to your world," she whispered. "No," Matteo said, his eyes never leaving hers. "But tonight my world owes you a debt. I do not want trouble." His gaze softened, not enough to make him less dangerous, only enough to make him harder to understand. "Trouble already found you. I am offering it a reason to be afraid." Mara should have refused. She should have thrown his coat back, walked past the cars, and found some way home with her dead phone and empty bank account and broken little bag. But then her father's face rose in her mind. His tired smile, his pill bottles, the bill hidden in her locker, now locked inside a hospital that had thrown her away. Matteo seemed to read the weight behind her eyes. "You have someone waiting for you," he said. "My father. Is he ill?" Mara looked away. "He needs care I can barely afford." The change in Matteo was quiet, but every man around him seemed to feel it. His kindness did not vanish. It turned darker, sharper, protective in a way that made the snowy street feel suddenly warmer and more dangerous all at once. "Then we start there," he said. Mara frowned. "Start what?" Matteo reached for the torn paper bag before it could split completely and took it from her with surprising care. In his hands, her cheap belongings looked painfully small. "The part of your life," he said, "where no one gets to throw you away again." Mara stood beneath the bridge with his coat around her shoulders and the city holding its breath around them. She had spent years being useful and invisible, years being soft where the world wanted sharpness, gentle where the world rewarded cruelty, brave where no one bothered to look. Now the most feared man in New York was watching her, as if she were not an inconvenience, not a mistake, not a woman too large for the picture, but the only person in the whole frozen city worth seeing. And for the first time that night, Mara was not sure if she had been rescued from danger or carried straight into the heart of it. The ride through the sleeping city felt unreal, like Mara had stepped out of her own life and into someone else's dream. The black car was silent except for the low whisper of tires over wet pavement and the soft hum of heat blowing against her frozen hands. Matteo sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the quiet power of him, but he did not crowd her. He did not touch her again, after placing his coat around her shoulders. Somehow that made him feel even more dangerous. A man who knew when not to reach was often more frightening than a man who took whatever he wanted. Mara kept her eyes on the window as the waterfront slid past in dark shapes of brick, iron and snow. Her torn paper bag rested at Matteo's feet, carefully placed upright as if it held something precious instead of worn sneakers, a spare scrub top, and the last little pieces of a job that had just been stolen from her. She wanted to ask where he was taking her. She wanted to demand to be let out, but her body was too tired for pride, and her heart was still caught on the simple fact that someone had looked at what happened to her and called it wrong. "My father needs to know I'm safe," she said at last, her voice softer than she wanted it to be. Matteo reached into his coat pocket and handed her a phone. "Call him." Mara stared at it for a second before taking it. The screen lit beneath her thumb, clean and expensive and unfamiliar. She dialed from memory. Her father answered on the fourth ring, his voice rough with sleep and pain. "Mara?" She closed her eyes. Just hearing him nearly broke her. "I'm okay, Dad. I'm sorry I'm calling from a strange number. My phone died." "You sound tired, baby." "I am." She looked down at her lap, twisting the edge of Matteo's coat between her fingers. "Something happened at work. I'll explain everything soon, but I'm safe." There was a pause. Her father had always been good at hearing what she did not say. "Did they hurt you?" Mara swallowed hard. "No, but I lost the job." The silence on the other end became heavy. "Mara," he said, and she could already hear the guilt rising in him. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't do that. I'm going to figure it out." Matteo turned his head slightly, watching her with a gaze so still it felt like a promise forming in the dark. Her father took a shaking breath. "Come home." "I will," she said, though she was not sure when that would be true. "I just need to handle something first." When she ended the call, she handed the phone back. Matteo did not take it right away. "He loves you," he said. Mara let out a tired laugh with no humor in it. "That's the problem. Sick people who love you always think they're the burden. And daughters who love them think they have to bleed quietly to keep the lights on." Mara looked at him then. He was staring straight ahead, but there was something in his voice that sounded older than the man beside her, something shaped by loss. "You know that feeling?" she asked. "I know what it is to make promises to people you cannot bring back," Matteo said. The car turned onto a quiet street lined with old townhouses behind iron gates. Men were already waiting near one of them, their dark coats dusted with snow. The house itself was beautiful, in a guarded, secretive way, with warm light glowing behind thick curtains and a polished brass number on the door. Not a mansion, not a palace, but safe, strong, hidden in plain sight. Mara stepped out slowly. Matteo stayed near her as they entered, not touching her, but making it clear that no one else should come too close. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish, fresh bread, and heat. A fire burned low in a marble fireplace. There were thick rugs, soft lamps, and framed paintings of the harbour on the walls. Mara had not realized how cold she was until warmth wrapped around her all at once. An older woman with silver hair came down the hall. "Mr. De Luca," she said. "Mrs. Bell," Matteo replied. "This is Mara Voss. She is not a guest. She is under my protection. Anything she asks for, she receives." Mara stiffened. "I don't need to be treated like some fragile thing." Matteo turned to her. "I know." The answer surprised her enough that she had no reply. Mrs. Bell gave Mara a gentle smile that did not carry pity, which made Mara's throat tighten all over again. She was shown to a bedroom upstairs with clean clothes folded at the foot of the bed, a private bathroom, and a window looking out over the snow-covered street. There was no lock on the outside of the door. She checked, twice. By morning, everything had changed. Matteo's private doctors arrived before breakfast, not with cold impatience or clipboard arrogance, but with careful voices and real attention. Mara rode with them to her apartment, where her father sat in his chair by the window, confused and proud, and frightened by the sight of the black cars outside. Matteo did not enter first. He let Mara go ahead. He waited in the hall like a shadow that had learned manners. Jonah Voss looked from the doctors to his daughter, then to the tall man standing behind her. "Mara," he said slowly, "what kind of trouble are we in?" "The kind that comes with better medical care," Mara said, trying to smile. Her father narrowed his eyes. "That is not an answer." "No," Matteo said from the doorway, "but it is the truth." Jonah studied him for a long moment. He had once worked around dangerous men on the docks and knew the look of someone who did not need to raise his voice. "You're the reason my daughter is wrapped in a coat that costs more than my old truck." Matteo did not blink. "Your daughter saved my goddaughter's life. Saint Aurelia's punished her for it. I am correcting what I can. And what do you want from her?" Mara held her breath. Matteo's eyes moved to her, then back to her father. "Nothing she does not choose to give." It should not have comforted her. Coming from a man like him, it should have sounded impossible. But he said it like a line he would not cross, even if the rest of the world burned behind him. By afternoon, Mara and her father were moved into the townhouse. Jonah protested until one of the doctors adjusted his pain plan, examined an old surgical report no one else had bothered to read closely, and found a treatment option that had never been explained to him. After that, he went very quiet. Mara stood in the hallway outside his room and cried with one hand over her mouth, not because she was weak, but because hope was sometimes more painful than fear. Matteo found her there. He did not tell her not to cry. He simply stood beside her until she could breathe again. Over the next few days, the world outside the townhouse began to twist itself into a shape Mara did not recognize. Matteo's men moved silently through the city. Lawyers appeared with files. Investigators followed money through donor accounts, drug orders, private treatment lists, and quiet payouts hidden beneath polished hospital language. Mara did not ask how Matteo opened doors that had been locked for years. She did not want to know all of it. But she read every file he placed in front of her, because the truth inside them belonged to patients, and Mara had never been able to look away from patients. The deeper they dug, the uglier Saint Aurelia's became. There were names of people turned away from emergency care because they had no insurance. There were reports changed after deaths. There were experimental drugs quietly moved to private suites for wealthy donors, while ordinary patients waited, suffered, and disappeared into paperwork. There were emails from Celeste Warden, written in graceful, careful language that somehow made cruelty sound like business. There were notes from Dr. Calloway, cold and clean, explaining which patients were worth risk and which were not. And then there was Sophia. The poisoning had not been random. Someone at the charity event had known she would be there. Someone had known she was connected to Matteo. Someone had believed her death would start a war, distract the city, and bury the hospital's secrets beneath smoke and fear. The same donor circle that funded St. Aurelia's had been washing money through medical foundations, buying early access to drugs, and using the hospital as a polished front for something rotten. Mara sat at the dining table late one night with the evidence spread before her, her hands curled into fists. "All those people," she whispered, "they came there for help." Matteo sat across from her, his face half-shadowed by the lamp, and the people in charge saw price tags. Mara looked up. "You're a criminal. Yes, you hurt people. When I choose to." She should have hated the honesty. Instead, it settled between them like a blade, placed carefully on a table. Mara touched one of the files. They hurt people while calling it care. Matteo's gaze softened in that strange, quiet way that still made her heart unsteady. "That is why your anger scares them more than mine ever could." The emergency board meeting was called 3 nights later. Celeste Warden believed she was walking into a room where she could control the story. She arrived in a pale grey suit, smooth as glass, ready to speak about reputation, safety, and the unfortunate actions of a former employee. Dr. Calloway came beside her, wearing his noble sadness like a costume. The board members took their seats around the long table on the top floor of St. Aurelia's, where the windows looked out over the dark water and the city lights flickered like distant candles. Then the doors opened. Mara entered first. For one breath, the room did not seem to understand her. They had expected the tired nurse in stained scrubs, the fired woman with wet shoes and a broken paper bag, the soft target who would shrink beneath their eyes. But Mara did not shrink. She wore a dark blue dress that moved gently over her curves and made no apology for them. Her curls framed her face. Her hands were steady at her sides. She was still plus size, still soft, still Mara, but something inside her had stopped asking permission to exist. Matteo walked beside her in a black suit, silent and controlled, with his men and a team of attorneys behind him. 2 police detectives followed. Then came members of the press, held at the doorway but close enough to hear. Celeste rose sharply. "This is a private meeting." Matteo placed a folder on the table. Not anymore. The room went still. Celeste's eyes flashed. "Mr. De Luca, this hospital does not answer to you." "It does now," Matteo said. "As of 6 this evening, my company holds controlling interest in St. Aurelia's." The board erupted in shocked voices. Celeste's face lost its color. Calloway stepped back as if the floor had shifted beneath him. Mara looked at the people who had mocked her, used her, dismissed her, and finally tried to erase her. She expected to feel fear. Instead, she felt the deep calm that always came right before she saved a life. "This hospital killed people," Mara said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. Celeste laughed once, brittle and sharp. "You are a disgruntled former employee." "No," Mara said. "I am the nurse who kept your latest victim alive long enough for the truth to catch up." Matteo opened the folder. The attorneys began passing copies down the table. Bank transfers, altered reports, drug access logs, emergency denial records, emails, names, dates, deaths. Each page landed like another stone on a grave Celeste had thought would stay buried. Dr. Calloway tried to speak first. "These records are being taken out of context." Mara turned to him. "Mrs. Alvarez came in with chest pain at 1 in the morning. You told us to transfer her because she had no coverage. She died in the ambulance bay before transport arrived." His mouth opened, then closed. Marcus Reed was denied an experimental treatment because a donor's son wanted the same drug after a skiing accident. Marcus was 29. Calloway's hands began to shake. Mara looked at Celeste. "You wrote that his case had poor public value." The words seemed to poison the air. One of the detectives stepped forward. Celeste backed away from the table. "You cannot do this." Matteo's voice was soft. She already did. Celeste turned her fury on Mara then, all her polish cracking at once. "You think this makes you important. You think wearing a nice dress and standing beside him changes what you are." For the first time, Mara smiled. It was not cruel. It was not sweet. It was the smile of a woman who had finally set down a weight that never belonged to her. "No," Mara said. "Saving people is what made me important. You were just too busy looking at my body to notice my hands." The detectives moved in. Calloway folded almost immediately, his pride collapsing into panic. Celeste fought with words until the handcuffs closed around her wrists. As she was led past Mara, she looked smaller than she ever had behind that perfect lipstick and expensive suit. Not because Mara had become cruel, but because truth had stripped the room of all its costumes. Outside the boardroom, reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Nurses lined the hallway in stunned silence. Some looked ashamed, some looked afraid. A few looked at Mara with something like wonder. She did not need their approval anymore, but she accepted the silence. It was better than their laughter. Matteo stood beside her as the hospital changed hands before dawn. In the weeks that followed, St. Aurelia's became a different place. Not all at once. Old walls did not forget old ghosts quickly, but the emergency doors stayed open. The billing rules changed. The private donor suites were reviewed, stripped, and rebuilt into treatment rooms. A new foundation was created for patients who had nowhere else to go, and Matteo offered Mara control of it in front of the same board that had once watched her be thrown out. Mara did not accept right away. She made him wait 3 full days while she read every term, questioned every lawyer, and rewrote entire sections in plain language, so no future director could hide cruelty behind pretty words. Matteo watched her do it with quiet pride, leaning in doorways, answering when asked, never once pretending her power had come from him. When she finally signed, her father was there. Sophia was there too, pale but alive, holding Mara's hand with both of hers, and crying so hard she could barely say thank you. Mara hugged her gently, feeling the young woman's heartbeat against her chest, steady and real. That was the moment everything became worth it. Months later, snow returned to the waterfront, softer this time, falling over the roof of St. Aurelia's. As ambulances came and went beneath bright new lights, Mara stood at the entrance in a long, dark coat, watching a team rush a patient inside, without stopping to ask about insurance first. She felt Matteo approach before she saw him. He had that effect on the air, like the world quietly straightened when he entered it. "You look pleased," he said. "I look exhausted," Mara replied. "That too." She smiled despite herself. He stood beside her, close enough that his shoulder nearly brushed hers. In public, Matteo De Luca was still feared. Men still lowered their voices when they said his name. Enemies still disappeared from his path before he had to ask twice. But with Mara, his danger had become something focused and strangely tender, like a storm that had chosen one house it would never touch. "You rebuilt it," he said. Mara watched the emergency doors close behind the patient. "No, we're still rebuilding." "We?" She looked at him then. His dark eyes held hers, steady and devoted, with that same quiet intensity from the night under the bridge. "Yes," she said. "We." Matteo's expression softened. He reached for her hand, giving her time to pull away. She did not. His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure. "You know," he said, "when I first saw you, you were standing in the snow like the whole city had tried to break you and failed." Mara looked out at the water, where the lights shimmered over the black surface. "When I first saw you, I thought you were there to kill me. I was there to thank you. You had a strange way of doing it." His mouth curved faintly. "I have been told I lack softness." Mara laughed, quiet and real. "Only by people who haven't seen you argue with my father about soup." Matteo looked almost offended. "Your father is stubborn. He says the same about you. He is correct." They stood there together as the snow fell, the nurse who refused to let a girl die, and the mafia boss who had arrived in the dark to repay a debt, and found something far more dangerous than loyalty. He had found a woman who did not need a crown to be powerful. Mara had always been powerful. She had been powerful in tired scrubs, in soaked shoes, in hospital halls where no one clapped when she saved lives. She had been powerful when she broke the rules for the right reason. She had been powerful when she stood before the people who shamed her and told the truth without trembling. Matteo did not make her a queen. He simply stood beside her until the world was forced to see what had been there all along. And from that winter forward, the old hospital by the water no longer protected profits before people. It no longer belonged to polished liars, cruel doctors, or donors who thought money made them holy. It belonged to the frightened, the wounded, the forgotten, and the desperate. It belonged to every patient who came through the doors, needing someone brave enough to stay. And at the heart of it stood Mara Voss, the plus-size trauma nurse they once tried to throw away, now the woman who changed the soul of Saint Aurelia's with steady hands, a fearless heart, and one impossible act of mercy, on a night when everyone else chose fear.
No one in Belladonna Harbor ever questioned Raffaele Falcone twice. Not if they wanted to keep their jobs, their teeth, and their quiet little lives near the water. He owned the docks without signing his name to them, controlled the hotels without smiling for the ribbon cuttings, and moved through the city like a storm dressed in black wool and polished leather. His voice could freeze a room. His silence could empty one, but the strangest order he ever gave had nothing to do with money, guns, ships, or enemies. It came on a rainy Monday morning, in the middle of an executive meeting, when he looked up from a shipping report and said that no unmarried man was allowed to escort Elena Moretti anywhere off the executive floor without his personal approval. At first, nobody moved. The room stayed perfectly still, as if the air had forgotten how to breathe. Raffaele did not explain himself. He only turned a page, tapped one finger against the report, and asked why the southern warehouse numbers were off by 3%. That was how he gave commands. No drama, no raised voice. Just a quiet sentence dropped on the table like a loaded weapon. The senior managers nodded because nodding was safer than understanding, and by lunch, the new rule had traveled through every office, loading dock, hotel kitchen, security booth, and back hallway in Belladonna Harbor. Elena Moretti knew nothing about it. Most people called her Lena, because Elena sounded too formal for a woman who kept candy in the second drawer of her desk and wore earrings shaped like cherries, lemons, tiny suns, or little blue flowers. She was Raffaele's executive operations coordinator, which was the clean, professional way of saying that half of his empire would collapse before breakfast if she ever decided not to answer her phone. She was 30, soft-bodied, bright-eyed, and cheerfully round in a way the world had never been gentle about. Her dresses were colorful, her shoes were comfortable, and her laugh had a way of reaching the cold corners of the executive floor before anyone had time to stop it. She had worked beside Raffaele for 4 years, though beside was a strange word for what she did. She managed his schedule, tracked ship arrivals, corrected contract errors, smoothed over arguments between captains, remembered which investor hated seafood, and knew exactly which hotel ballroom had a broken air vent that made older guests uncomfortable. She could look at a stack of delivery records and spot the missing signature before the accountants finished opening their laptops. She could hear 2 dock workers muttering in a hallway and know which crew was about to walk off the job. She knew when a supplier was lying, when a politician wanted a favor, and when Raffaele had gone too long without eating, though she was wise enough to address that last problem by leaving a plate outside his office and pretending she had forgotten it there. People thought Raffaele ran Belladonna Harbor because they feared him. That was partly true. Fear was useful. Fear opened doors, closed mouths, and kept nervous men loyal. But the harbor kept breathing because Lena remembered the human things that powerful men forgot. She remembered birthdays, sick children, grieving mothers, college applications, medication allergies, and the night crews who worked through storms with wet socks and empty stomachs. If a worker's wife was in the hospital, Lena found the right form before he asked. If a young clerk was short on rent, Lena knew which emergency fund had enough room in it. If a captain lost his temper after 3 sleepless nights, Lena did not report him. She brought him coffee, waited for him to calm down, and then fixed the schedule before Raffaele heard there had been a problem. That was why people came to her. Not just assistants and clerks, but men with scarred hands and expensive watches. Harbor inspectors leaned against her doorframe with excuses. Security guards walked past her office twice, when once would have done. Junior accountants offered to carry boxes that weighed less than her purse. Dock captains who had once shouted down union lawyers waited quietly outside her office, hats in hand, because Lena would look up from her work and say, with warmth that felt almost dangerous in that building, "Give me 2 minutes, honey, and I'll help you." Raffaele noticed all of it. He noticed everything. That was how he had lived this long. A man did not become the most feared name on the coast by missing small movements. He saw the way Marco Santini, the young harbor inspector with the easy smile, lingered too long beside Lena's desk. He saw one of the night security men save the last powdered pastry from the break room because Lena liked them with her coffee. He saw the new financial analyst suddenly develop questions that only required Lena's attention when she wore her green dress. Raffaele saw, and with every small kindness aimed at her, something dark and unreasonable pressed harder beneath his ribs. The first real incident happened during a violent afternoon storm. Rain came sideways off the water and slapped against the glass walls of the administrative building. The sky turned gray-green, and the harbor cranes disappeared behind sheets of wind. Lena had been working late, as usual, trying to fix a delivery issue before a group of investors arrived at the Falcone Grand Hotel. She stepped out with a folder tucked under one arm and her flower earrings swinging against her cheeks, only to stop under the awning and stare at the storm with an expression of tired defeat. Marco Santini appeared beside her with an umbrella. It was a cheap black umbrella, too small for 2 people and too weak for a harbor storm, but Marco offered it with a shy grin and said he could walk her to the hotel. Lena laughed, because the umbrella immediately turned inside out with a sad little pop. Marco laughed too. Together they hurried through the rain, shoulders bumping, Lena holding her folder against her chest, Marco trying and failing to keep them both dry. By the time they reached the hotel doors, Lena was breathless with laughter, and rainwater was running down her sleeves. From the top-floor window, Raffaele watched them. He stood completely still, one hand in his pocket, his face unreadable. Behind him, Nico Bellini, his consigliere and the only man alive who could safely annoy him, looked up from a stack of contracts and followed his gaze. "She's laughing," Nico said carefully. "I can see that. With an employee. I can see that too." Nico waited. Raffaele did not move. The next morning, Marco Santini received a special assignment inspecting a remote warehouse on the far edge of the harbor every night for 6 weeks. The warehouse was cold, damp, badly lit, and so distant from the executive floor that it might as well have been in another state. Marco accepted the order with pale confusion. Lena congratulated him warmly when she heard, telling him Raffaele must really trust him with important work. Marco looked over her shoulder at Raffaele's closed office door and swallowed hard. That was how the pattern began. When a hotel chef invited Lena to a neighborhood food festival, he was transferred to supervise kitchens on a cargo ship that would not return for 10 days. When a financial analyst complimented Lena's red dress and told her the color suited her, he was sent to audit tugboat expenses in a branch office 2 cities away. When 2 bodyguards made her laugh in the elevator after midnight, both were assigned to guard an empty storage warehouse on the graveyard shift, where the most exciting event was a raccoon knocking over a trash can. Each reassignment came through official channels. Each sounded reasonable on paper. Each arrived within hours of a man smiling too warmly at Lena. The employees noticed before Lena did. Of course they noticed. People who worked for Raffaele Falcone learned to recognize danger in soft shoes. Soon, the younger unmarried men of Belladonna Harbor treated Lena's hallway like a haunted tunnel. They scattered when she approached. They stared at the floor when she spoke. One poor accountant nearly walked into a potted palm, trying to avoid holding the elevator for her. Married men, old men, and men with 5 grandchildren became the only ones brave enough to talk to her normally. The rest moved around her with the nervous caution of villagers trying not to wake a sleeping dragon. Someone in shipping named the punishments harbor vacations, and the name spread like smoke. By the end of the month, there was an unofficial betting pool hidden behind a coffee machine near the lower offices. People guessed who would be sent away next, how far he would go, and whether he would deserve it. The older workers found it hilarious. The younger ones did not. Lena, who believed the best of people until life forced her not to, assumed Raffaele was simply strengthening remote operations. She sent care packages to the reassigned men, filled with snacks, aspirin, clean socks, and little handwritten notes telling them she was proud of their new opportunities. That only made everything worse. Raffaele found one of those notes on a dock captain's desk and stared at it for a full minute. It was written in Lena's round, careful handwriting. There was a tiny smiley face beside her name. The captain, a married man with bad knees and no romantic interest in anyone but his late wife's memory, looked genuinely afraid he might be thrown into the sea. Nico heard about it before dinner. You are terrorizing half the workforce because a kind woman owns stationery, Nico said that evening, standing in Raffaele's office with his arms crossed. Do you hear how that sounds? Raffaele signed a document without looking up. It sounds efficient. It sounds deranged. It keeps distractions away from her. Raffaele. The pen stopped moving. Nico lowered his voice. Ask her to dinner. Raffaele looked up slowly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Men who did not know him well might have stepped back. Nico did not. He had known Raffaele since they were boys, stealing oranges from the market, and running from men twice their size. She works for me, Raffaele said. She runs your life. She deserves peace. She deserves honesty. Raffaele's mouth tightened. For a moment, something almost human crossed his face. Something tired. Something afraid. It vanished so quickly most people would have missed it. Nico did not. You think she will say no, Nico said. Raffaele looked back down at the document. I think she deserves someone who does not turn every room he enters into a warning. Nico sighed. And your answer is to send every man who smiles at her into exile? My answer is to make sure no fool hurts her. Lena is not a glass vase. No, Raffaele said quietly. She is not. That was the problem. Lena was not fragile. She was not helpless. She was not some delicate thing he could place behind locked doors and protect from the world. She was bright and kind and stubborn in ways that made dangerous men soften before they understood why. She remembered people. She saw people. And Raffaele, who had spent most of his life being seen only as a threat, did not know what to do with the way she looked at him when she brought him coffee and said, "You forgot lunch again, didn't you?" He could face knives. He could face guns. He could face betrayal from men who had sworn loyalty over blood. But he could not face Lena's gentle confusion if he told her the truth, and she smiled politely, the way kind women smiled when they had to refuse a man without wounding him. So he said nothing. Then Captain Emilio Russo gave Lena the compass. Emilio was 70 years old, a widower with silver hair, weathered hands, and a voice roughened by decades of sea air. His granddaughter had been accepted into a scholarship program after Lena quietly helped fix the application when a missing document almost ruined everything. Emilio came to the executive floor wearing his best jacket and carrying a small wooden box. Inside was an antique brass compass that had belonged to his late wife. He gave it to Lena with wet eyes and told her that some people helped others find their way without ever realizing it. Lena cried. Just a little. She hugged him. Raffaele saw that too. By sundown, Emilio had been assigned to supervise a 3-week shipping operation in the Gulf. Nico walked into Raffaele's office 10 minutes after the order went out and shut the door behind him. You became jealous of a grandfather, Nico said. Raffaele did not look ashamed. Nico pinched the bridge of his nose. A 70-year-old grandfather. He hugged her. He gave her a compass from his dead wife. He still hugged her. I have seen you negotiate with killers more reasonably than this. Raffaele leaned back in his chair. Then stop watching. Nico laughed once, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was shouting. One day, Lena is going to find out, and when she does, she is going to look at you with those big, disappointed eyes. I hope you survive it. Raffaele said nothing, but after Nico left, he opened the drawer beside him and took out one of Lena's notes from weeks earlier. She had left it on a meal tray outside his office. Don't forget water. Coffee is not a personality. Beneath the words, she had drawn a tiny lemon because she had been wearing lemon earrings that day. He folded the note once, carefully, and put it back. The harbor might have continued living under that strange, quiet madness if the Falcone Grand Hotel had not been preparing for its grand reopening. The hotel rose above the waterfront like a palace of glass and stone, all gold lighting, polished floors, and windows that caught the sunset in burning strips of orange. Investors were coming, politicians were coming, celebrities were coming, representatives from families that never appeared in newspapers were coming too, though their names were kept off every official guest list. Everything had to look perfect. More importantly, everything had to be controlled. That was when Celeste Arden arrived. Celeste moved through the hotel lobby like a blade wrapped in silk. She was an image consultant with a reputation for turning messy businesses into polished public dreams. She wore cream-colored suits, spoke in smooth, careful sentences, and looked at every person as if deciding whether they belonged in a magazine photograph or needed to be removed from the frame. Raffaele hired her because the reopening mattered. Belladonna Harbor was changing. The world was watching the waterfront now, and the Falcone name needed to shine in public while staying dark in private. Celeste understood shine. She did not understand Lena. The first time she saw her, Lena was standing near the service entrance with a clipboard tucked under one arm, handing sandwiches to maintenance workers who had been fixing a ballroom leak since dawn. Her yellow dress had little white flowers on it. Her hair was pinned up badly, with curls escaping around her cheeks. She was laughing at something one of the workers said, her whole face bright with it, while 3 department heads waited nearby for her advice, like students outside a favorite teacher's office. Celeste stopped walking. Her eyes moved over Lena's body, her comfortable shoes, her flower earrings, the small mustard stain near the edge of her clipboard. Nothing about Lena matched Celeste's idea of power, yet the workers listened to her. The department heads listened to her. A security captain with a scar across his brow lowered his voice when he spoke to her, almost gentle. Even Raffaele, who had been crossing the lobby with 2 lawyers, slowed for half a second when he heard Lena laugh. Celeste noticed that most of all. At first, her questions were polite. What exactly was Elena's role? Why did so many departments report through her? Was she client-facing? Would she need to be visible during the reopening? Lena answered everything cheerfully, assuming Celeste was just being thorough. She even offered to prepare a quick guide to the hotel's internal workflow, because she knew new consultants had a hard time understanding how many small pieces had to move together to keep the place alive. Celeste smiled with her mouth, not her eyes, and said that would be helpful. Within days, Lena began to find herself left out of meetings she usually ran. Revised schedules arrived without her notes. Promotional walkthroughs happened while she was helping overnight crews. Celeste suggested that the public-facing staff needed to reflect a more refined image, one that would comfort international investors. She said it softly, dressed in business language, but the meaning landed cold and heavy in Lena's stomach. Out of sight. That was a language Lena knew too well. She tried not to take it personally. She told herself the hotel reopening was stressful. She told herself Celeste had been hired for appearances, and appearances had never been Lena's strength. She had spent most of her life learning how to make herself useful enough to be tolerated, funny enough to be liked, and quiet enough not to be judged too loudly. Compliments slid off her because she did not trust them. Invitations confused her because she assumed men were being kind. When people stared, she checked her dress for stains. When men acted nervous, she assumed they feared Raffaele, because everyone feared Raffaele. But the office was changing around her. Conversations stopped when she entered. Younger men, who once asked her questions, now backed away with stiff smiles. 2 junior consultants went silent in the break room when she reached for coffee. A group of new hotel employees glanced at her, then at one another, then scattered as if she had brought bad weather with her. Even the kindness of long-time workers began to feel strange, because they were too quick to defend her, too quick to lower their voices, too quick to step between her and whispers she could not yet hear. One evening, while rain pressed softly against the hotel windows and the whole building smelled of fresh paint, flowers, and nervous money, Lena took the service corridor to avoid the crowded lobby. She was carrying a folder of corrected emergency supply records, her feet aching, her earrings shaped like tiny peaches swinging against her neck. Ahead of her, 2 junior consultants stood near the linen room, speaking in low voices. Lena almost called out to ask if they were lost. Then she heard her name. She stopped. The first voice said, Lena had too much influence for someone in her position. The second said Raffaele clearly had personal feelings for her, and Lena knew exactly how to use them. The first voice laughed softly and said maybe that was why men kept getting sent away after flirting with her. Maybe she liked making them pay. Maybe the whole organization would run better if people stopped pretending she was special. Lena stood very still. The folder in her arms felt suddenly too heavy. For a moment, she heard only the rain and the faraway hum of the hotel lights. Then the words settled inside her, one by one, each small and sharp. Men sent away, after flirting with her, personal feelings, using him, making them pay. She walked backward before they could see her. Her shoes made no sound on the service carpet. She turned the corner, found an empty storage room, stepped inside, and closed the door with careful, shaking hands. In the quiet darkness among folded linens and spare glassware, Lena looked back over the past few months with a new and terrible clarity. Marco's umbrella, the chef and the food festival, the analyst who liked her red dress, the bodyguards in the elevator, Captain Emilio and the compass. Every reassignment had come after a moment with her. Every nervous smile, every sudden silence, every man disappearing into faraway work had been connected by a thread she had been too trusting to see. She did not think, even then, that Raffaele loved her. That thought was too impossible. Men like Raffaele Falcone did not love women like her. They protected assets, controlled problems, and valued usefulness. No, Lena thought, pressing one hand over her mouth as shame rose hot behind her eyes. Something about her friendliness had caused trouble. Something about the way people treated her had made the organization look foolish. Maybe Celeste was right. Maybe all those kind little things Lena did, all the remembered birthdays and care packages and gentle jokes, had created confusion where there should have been order. By the time she returned to her office, the cheerful room with the fruit-shaped earrings in a little dish and snacks hidden in the drawer no longer felt like hers. It felt borrowed, temporary, like a place she had mistaken for home because no one had asked her to leave yet. Lena sat at her desk and opened a blank document. Outside the window, Belladonna Harbor glowed under the storm clouds, cranes standing tall against the dark water, hotel lights shining like gold coins scattered along the shore. Somewhere above her, Raffaele was probably in his office, calm and untouchable, unaware that the woman who had held his world together for 4 years was typing her resignation with trembling fingers. She promised herself she would stay until the reopening was finished. She would not abandon the workers. She would not leave the guests, the cruise or the hotel to suffer because her heart hurt. She would finish the job, fix the schedules, check the emergency plans one last time, and then she would go quietly. And far out over the black water, where the harbor lights ended and the sea became nothing but shadow, the first low growl of a coastal storm began rolling toward Belladonna Harbor. By the time the storm reached Belladonna Harbor, it did not come like weather. It came like a warning. The sky turned black before evening, folding over the waterfront in heavy layers of cloud, and the water rose against the docks with a slow, hungry patience that made even the oldest captains stop smiling. Rain struck the glass walls of the Falcone Grand Hotel so hard, it sounded like handfuls of gravel thrown from the dark. Wind bent the palm trees outside the entrance until their leaves scraped the windows like fingers, and far beyond the golden lobby lights, the harbor cranes vanished one by one behind gray sheets of water. Inside the hotel, everything was supposed to be perfect. White flowers filled tall crystal vases. Champagne waited in silver tubs. The marble floors had been polished until they reflected every chandelier like trapped stars. Investors stood near the ballroom in black suits and silk gowns, pretending not to watch the windows. Politicians murmured into phones. Celebrities smiled too brightly. Security men kept their hands close to their jackets. Celeste Arden moved through it all with a calm, frozen expression, giving small orders in her smooth voice, as if elegance alone could hold back the sea. Lena stood near the service desk with her resignation letter folded inside her bag. She had not given it to Raffaella yet. She told herself there would be time after the reopening, after the guests were safe, after the last delivery was checked, after the last emergency plan was no longer needed. She wore a deep blue dress with tiny silver flowers on it, comfortable shoes hidden beneath the hem, and earrings shaped like little peaches because she had put them on that morning without knowing why. Maybe because they were cheerful. Maybe because she wanted one small thing near her face that still felt like herself. She was checking the emergency supply list for the third time when the first generator failed. The lights flickered once, twice. Then half the lobby dropped into shadow. A nervous sound moved through the crowd, soft at first, then rising as the hotel's golden warmth turned into patches of cold emergency light. Somewhere below, an alarm began to pulse, not loud enough to panic people yet, but steady enough to make every trained worker look up. Lena felt the old part of her mind wake before fear could reach her. She turned toward the maintenance supervisor. "How long until the backup kicks in?" "It should have already," he said, his face pale. "Primary backup is dead. Secondary?" He swallowed, not responding. For one quiet second, Lena heard nothing except rain. Then the radios began crackling at once. Water in the lower service corridor. Elevator bank 3 frozen between floors. Medical supplies missing from the east storage room. Kitchen staff trapped near the freight entrance. Elderly guests waiting in the west ballroom without power. A child crying somewhere near the guest elevators. Too many voices. Too much confusion. Too many people looking toward the front doors as if the storm outside was the only danger. Celeste appeared beside her, white suit untouched, mouth tight with irritation. "We need to keep the investors calm. Move the visible guests into the main ballroom and make sure no one sees the service disruption." Lena stared at her. "This is not a service disruption. The lower corridors are flooding." "Then keep it away from the lobby," Celeste said sharply. "We cannot have panic during the reopening." That was when something inside Lena went still. For weeks, she had folded herself smaller under whispers, under careful looks, under the bruising idea that she was a problem people were too polite to name. But the hotel was full of people now. Workers, guests, elderly couples, families, kitchen staff, guards, men and women who had trusted her with their birthdays, their medicine, their grief, their overtime meals, their children's scholarship letters. The hotel did not need polish. It needed someone who remembered how it breathed. Lena picked up the nearest radio. "This is Lena Moretti." she said, her voice calm enough that 3 panicked employees stopped talking at once. All department heads switched to emergency channel 2. Maintenance, seal the lower service corridor from the laundry entrance and move everyone through the old east passage. Security, stop sending guests toward the main elevators. They are useless until we confirm the power grid. Kitchen team, I want hot water, blankets, and all sealed food moved to the ballroom. Medical team, report to me now with what you actually have, not what the sheet says we have. Celeste stared at her. You do not have authority to take over this event. Lena did not look at her. I do now. The words were not loud, but they landed like a door locking. People moved. Not because Lena scared them, not because she had Raffaele's name behind her. They moved because her voice sounded like shelter. Captains who had faced storms at sea answered her without question. Chefs rolled carts through side halls. Security men redirected guests with quiet firmness. Maintenance workers opened old service doors that most executives did not know existed. Lena remembered the original blueprints from a renovation file 3 years earlier, including the narrow staff passage behind the ballroom wall and the storage stair that led to the mezzanine without touching the flooded floor. The rain worsened. Wind shoved against the windows until the glass groaned. Somewhere below, water broke through a service door and rushed down the corridor with a sound like applause from something cruel. Lena stood at the center of the controlled chaos, soaked at the hem from running through a leaking hall, hair slipping loose from its pins, one peach earring missing. She sent 2 guards to help the kitchen crew. She sent the hotel pianist to comfort children in the ballroom because music made fear less sharp. She ordered every spare chair moved against the wall so elderly guests would not have to stand. She remembered that Mrs. Alvarez from housekeeping had nursing training, and she put her in charge of checking blood pressure for the older guests. Celeste tried twice to redirect attention back to the investors. No one listened. Then Lena saw the signature. It was on the emergency supply record, printed near the bottom of the page she had checked that morning, and again an hour ago. One delivery had been marked received by a contractor, whose name looked ordinary, until Lena saw the shape of the initials and felt a cold thread pull tight in her memory. She had seen the same name once before, buried inside a dispute over a warehouse lease connected to a rival family that had been circling Falcone territory for months. The missing medical supplies had not been misplaced. The generator failure was not bad luck. The storm had covered something deliberate. Lena pressed the radio button. Nico, if you can hear me, I need you to pull the contractor file for Marrow Electric and lock every entrance below ground level. This was planned. Static answered first. Then Nico's voice came through, thin but sharp. Lena, where is Raffaele? Not here yet. He is on his way. Lena closed her eyes for half a second, and for reasons she hated, relief hurt worse than fear. Then she opened them again. Tell him the hotel is still standing. By the time Raffaele arrived, Belladonna Harbor looked like it had been dragged beneath the ocean and thrown back onto land. His black car cut through flooded streets, headlights flashing across broken branches and sheets of rain. He stepped into the hotel with water running from his coat, 2 guards behind him, murder already cold in his eyes because he had heard the word sabotage and trapped guests on the way over. He expected screaming. He expected chaos. He expected Celeste, executives, investors, and frightened employees spinning in circles under dead lights. Instead, he found Lena. She was standing on the lower ballroom step with a radio in one hand and a stack of damp papers in the other, directing captains, guards, chefs, clerks, and senior managers as if she had been born in the center of a storm. People moved around her in clean lines. Guests sat wrapped in hotel blankets while kitchen staff passed out soup and bread. Elderly visitors were being checked by housekeeping and medical workers. Children listened to soft piano music near the far wall. Armed men twice Lena's size lowered their heads to hear her instructions, then obeyed before the sentence finished. Raffaele stopped walking. For years, he had known Lena was important. He had known she was brilliant, kind, impossible to replace. He had known the sound of her laugh could undo the worst parts of his day, and that her absence from a room made the air feel wrong. But seeing her there, soft dress damp, cheeks flushed, voice steady while his hotel survived around her, he understood with a force that almost hurt him. She had never needed his shadow to be powerful. She had only needed everyone to stop blocking the light. Lena looked up and saw him. For one brief second, the calm mask on her face trembled. Then she handed a radio to a captain and walked toward him. Generators were sabotaged, she said, because business was safer than feelings. Emergency supply records were altered. I found a contractor signature tied to the Marrow lease issue. Nico is checking it. No deaths, 3 serious injuries, but stable. Guests from the west side are in the ballroom. The lower service corridor is flooded, but sealed. We need pumps before morning. Raffaele stared at her as if the storm had ended and begun inside the same breath. You are hurt? He asked. No. You are sure? Yes. His gaze moved over her face, her hair, the missing earring, the damp hem of her dress. His jaw tightened. Who did this? I think someone connected to the rival family using Marrow Electric, but we can prove that later. Right now, the guests need calm, and your investors need to hear that the hotel survived because your staff knew what to do. My staff, Raffaele said quietly, knew what to do because of you. Lena looked away. The words touched the place in her heart that had been raw since the corridor whispers. She did not trust herself to answer. Not here. Not with his eyes on her like that. Not while her resignation letter sat inside her bag like a secret wound. The storm passed close to dawn. It left the city soaked and bruised, but alive. The hotel smelled of wet stone, coffee, candle wax, and tired people. Guests slept in chairs. Workers leaned against walls with their eyes closed. The first pale light touched the harbor windows, turning the water silver and gray. Lena stayed until every person was counted, every injury recorded, every department checked, and every emergency note written in her careful hand. Only then did she return to her office. She found Raffaele there. He was standing beside her desk, holding the folded letter. The room felt too small around him. The little dish of fruit earrings sat beside his hand. The snacks in her drawer were still slightly open. A sweater hung over her chair. Everything looked painfully ordinary, as if her life had not quietly broken in the night. Raffaele's face was unlike anything she had ever seen on him. Not anger, not coldness, horror. You were leaving, he said. Lena stood in the doorway. Her body felt heavy with exhaustion, but her voice came out calm. After the reopening. Why? She laughed once, soft and tired, with no humor in it. You read the letter. I read words, he said. I want the truth. The truth was harder. The truth had teeth. Lena walked inside and set her radio on the desk. Because people are talking. Because men keep getting sent away after being kind to me. Because Celeste thinks I manipulate you. Because maybe other people think it too. And because I didn't know what was happening until I started looking back. Raffaele went very still. Lena looked at him fully then, and the ache in her chest sharpened. Did you do it? The silence answered before he did. Yes, he said. Her eyes burned. Marco? The chef? The analyst? The guards? Captain Emilio? His jaw flexed at the old man's name, and Lena's hurt turned hot. Raffaele, he is 70. I know. He gave me his wife's compass. I know. You sent a grieving grandfather to the Gulf because he hugged me? His eyes lowered. Yes. For a moment, Lena could only stare at him. This man could frighten politicians, command captains, silence criminals, and move money through half the coast without leaving fingerprints. Yet somehow, in the quiet disaster of her office, he looked almost ashamed. Why? She whispered. Raffaele closed his hand around the resignation letter, but did not crush it, because I was jealous. The word hung between them, strange and impossible. Lena shook her head a little. No. Yes. No, you don't get to say that like it explains everything. It does not explain everything, he said. It explains the worst of me. The door opened before she could answer. Nico stepped in, took one look at both of them, and sighed like a man who had been waiting 4 years for a building to catch fire. Good, Nico said. You found the letter. Raffaele looked at him with warning in his eyes. Nico ignored it completely. And now, since shame has finally entered the room, we are going to the emergency meeting before Celeste convinces the investors that Lena caused the weather. The meeting happened in the half-lit ballroom, with dawn pressing silver against the windows and the last of the storm dripping from the roof. Senior executives sat with stiff backs. Investors looked tired and unsettled. Celeste stood near the front, flawless again, in a fresh cream suit someone must have found for her, while Lena sat near the side, with her hands folded in her lap and her heart beating painfully under her blue dress. Celeste spoke first. She praised the staff. She mentioned the storm. She called the sabotage unfortunate and said the public message would need careful handling. Then, slowly, smoothly, she turned the room toward Lena. She said influence without structure was dangerous. She said emotional loyalty could not replace professional hierarchy. She said the hotel's survival proved that certain lines inside the organization had become unclear. Then she looked directly at Raffaele and said that Miss Moretti's position needed to be reconsidered before personal attachment caused further instability. Lena felt every eye turn toward her. For a moment, she was back in the corridor, hearing whispers, too much influence, personal feelings. The organization would run better without her. She opened her mouth, though she did not know what she would say. Raffaele stood before she could speak. The room changed at once. He did not raise his voice. He never needed to. Elena Moretti discovered fraudulent invoices 3 years ago that saved this organization from a federal audit, he said. She corrected a customs error that would have seized 4 ships and cost us millions. She found security weaknesses in this hotel before the security team did. She negotiated with striking dock workers when senior management failed to listen. She protected families during layoffs. She remembers contracts none of you read and solves problems most of you never notice because she fixes them before they reach your desks. No one moved. Raffaele placed a folder on the table. Inside this file is documentation of her work, dates, reports, corrections, prevented losses. Every executive in this room has benefited from her intelligence. Some of you have built reputations on problems she quietly solved. Several faces went pale. Celeste's smile thinned. No one is denying Miss Moretti's usefulness. Usefulness, Raffaele repeated softly. The word sounded colder in his mouth than any shout could have. He turned his gaze toward her, and even Celeste seemed to understand she had stepped too close to something dangerous. Elena did not gain authority because I loved her, Raffaele said. I began loving her because she had already earned the trust of everyone around her. Lena stopped breathing. The room disappeared for a second. The storm, the whispers, the letter, Celeste. All of it blurred beneath the impossible weight of those words. Raffaele looked back at the table, and while we are correcting false stories, Elena never asked me to punish any man in this organization. She never requested a transfer, reassignment, demotion, or inconvenience of any kind. Every so-called harbor vacation was my decision, mine alone. It was foolish. It was jealous. It was unfair. And it ends today. Somewhere near the back, Nico looked toward the ceiling, like a man thanking heaven for a miracle. Lena's cheeks burned, but not with shame now, with shock, with anger, with something dangerously close to hope. Celeste tried one last time. Mr. Falcone, this confirms my concern. If your personal feelings are affecting staffing decisions, my personal failures are not Elena's burden, Raffaele said, and your contract with this organization is terminated. Celeste's face went blank. You may leave through the front entrance, he continued, unless you prefer a harbor vacation. No one laughed out loud, but the room came close. After the meeting, Lena did not run to him. She did not fall into his arms. She did not forgive him because he had said beautiful things in front of important people. She waited until they were alone on the balcony overlooking the wet harbor, where morning light spread across the water, and the city smelled clean in the strange way it only could after a storm. Raffaele stood beside her, quiet. Lena watched gulls circle over the docks. You hurt people. I know. You embarrassed them. Yes. You made me question every friendship I had here. His breath left slowly. Yes. And you made me believe I was the problem. Raffaele closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the feared man of Belladonna Harbor looked stripped down to something bare and wounded. That is the part I will never forgive myself for. Lena turned to him. I am not accepting an apology unless every unfair assignment is reversed. Done. And the rule about unmarried men escorting me anywhere is gone. Gone. And I can speak to anyone I choose. His jaw tightened by instinct, but he nodded. Yes. And if a man gives me an umbrella, or a compliment, or an antique family heirloom, you will not send him to another coastline. A pained silence followed. Raffaele. I said yes. She almost smiled, but held it back. You will also apologize to Captain Emilio. He looked at her with the grave expression of a man being asked to walk into open gunfire. Personally. Yes. Fine. And you will stop deciding what I deserve without asking me. That one landed deepest. Raffaele stepped closer, but not too close. For once, he waited. I thought you deserved someone softer than me. Maybe I do, Lena said. His face went still. Then she reached out and touched the front of his damp black shirt, just lightly enough to feel his heartbeat under her fingers. But maybe I get to decide what kind of man I love. Raffaele's eyes darkened, not with anger this time, but with something that looked like awe. You love me? He asked, and his voice was rougher than she had ever heard it. Lena let out a shaky breath. For a long time. But I thought a man like you would never see a woman like me that way. He moved then, slowly, carefully, as if she were not fragile but sacred. His hand rose to her cheek, warm and steady. Lena, I saw you before I understood what seeing meant. Your body was never something I ignored, never something I tolerated. I have wanted every soft inch of you with a hunger that made me stupid. But that is not what made me unable to live without you. Her eyes filled. It was your courage, he whispered, your memory, your laugh, your impossible kindness, the way dangerous men become human near you, the way you build shelter wherever you stand. I have owned hotels, ships, warehouses, and half this harbor, but you are the first person who ever made any of it feel like a home. Lena's tears slipped free. Quiet and warm. Raffaele brushed them away with his thumb. I am sorry I let other people tell you what your place was. I am sorry I hid the truth so long that it became a weapon against you. I am sorry I made my fear your wound. She leaned into his hand, tired of being strong for just one breath. You are going to have to earn this slowly. I know. No more secret orders. No more secret orders. No more harbor vacations. His mouth twitched. Raffaele. No more harbor vacations, he said, though it clearly pained him. And no bodyguards 6 feet behind us if you ever take me somewhere normal. His eyes sharpened. Somewhere normal. Lena looked out at the brightening water. There was a neighborhood food festival I missed. Because I sent the chef away. Because you sent the chef away. Raffaele nodded once, solemn as a man accepting judgment. Then I will take you to the festival. No private room. No private room. No shutting down the street. His silence was too long. Raffaele, he exhaled. No shutting down the street. And you will eat something from a paper plate without threatening anyone. That depends on the quality of the food. Raffaele. I will try. That was the first time Lena laughed after the storm, and the sound hit him harder than any bullet ever had. Several months later, Belladonna Harbor no longer whispered about whether Lena Moretti belonged on the executive floor. Her name was on the door now, written in clean black letters beneath the title, Director of Harbor Operations. The office was brighter than before, with flowers on the windowsill, emergency snacks in 3 drawers, and the antique compass from Captain Emilio displayed on a small wooden stand. The captain himself had returned from the Gulf with a personal apology from Raffaele, a raise, and the smug expression of a man who knew he had survived being the most dangerous grandfather in the city. The displaced employees returned too. Marco came back from the remote warehouse with a stronger fear of umbrellas. The chef returned from the cargo ship and finally brought Lena to the food festival as a friend, though Raffaele stood beside her the whole time with his sleeves rolled up and his dark eyes watching every unmarried man who came within 10 feet of the dessert table. Lena ate fried dough from a paper plate, kissed powdered sugar from the corner of Raffaele's mouth, and told him he was behaving almost normally. He said almost was generous. The hotel reopened again, quieter this time and stronger for what had happened. The sabotage was traced back to the rival family, and though no one ever told Lena the full details of how Raffaele answered that insult, the family withdrew from Belladonna Harbor so completely that even their lawyers stopped returning calls. Celeste Arden disappeared into another city's luxury scene, where people still believed polish mattered more than loyalty. At the harbor, people remembered the storm differently. Guests remembered candlelight and soup in the ballroom. Workers remembered Lena's calm voice through the radio. Investors remembered that the hotel had survived a disaster without losing a single life. Raffaele remembered seeing the woman he loved stand in the center of his empire and command it better than any man he had ever known. And Lena remembered too. She remembered the shame. She remembered the letter. She remembered the moment she almost walked away from the life she had built because she believed whispers more than her own worth. That memory stayed with her, not as a wound, but as a compass. It pointed her back to herself whenever the old doubts tried to rise. One golden evening near the end of summer, a visiting hotel owner kissed Lena's hand after praising her work on the harbor expansion. He was handsome, unmarried, charming, and foolish enough to hold her fingers 2 seconds too long. Across the room, Raffaele's expression darkened. Lena saw it at once. The hotel owner walked away smiling, completely unaware that the most feared man in Belladonna Harbor had already begun imagining distant ports, inconvenient inspections, and cargo routes that required immediate personal supervision. Lena stepped beside Raffaele and slipped her hand into his. "No," she said softly. He looked down at her. "I said nothing. You thought very loudly. He kissed your hand. He praised my work. He had lips. Most people do." Raffaele's mouth tightened. Lena squeezed his hand, and after a long, difficult second, he relaxed. Not fully. Raffaele Falcone would never become harmless. But he was learning the difference between love and control, between protection and fear, between holding someone close and locking every door around them. Lena rose onto her toes and kissed his cheek. "Good," she whispered. His eyes softened in the way only she ever saw. "I am trying. I know." Outside, Belladonna Harbor glowed under the evening sky. Ships moving slowly through water turned copper by the setting sun. The cranes stood tall. The hotel windows burned gold. Somewhere below, workers changed shifts, captains checked routes, kitchens prepared dinner, and the city continued its quiet, dangerous breathing. Lena stood beside Raffaele, no longer hidden, no longer mistaken for harmless, no longer waiting for someone else to decide her value. She had not become powerful because a feared man loved her. She had become powerful because she had always been the heart of a world that did not know how to name her. And Raffaele, who had once controlled the harbor with silence and fear, finally understood the truth that had nearly cost him everything. Some queens do not take a throne by force. Some walk in wearing comfortable shoes, fruit-shaped earrings, and a smile soft enough to make dangerous men remember they are human.